In the quiet hills of early 20th century New England, a young man of reserved temperament began a life that would one day intersect with the larger currents of American history. His era unfolded slowly, shaped by the steady rhythms of small towns, the lingering influence of the 19th century, and the cautious emergence of a modern nation finding its pace. From these calm surroundings came a figure whose public life would be marked by restraint, deliberation, and a belief in the value of order. His presence on the national stage would remain measured, yet deeply connected to the times he inhabited. As this gentle narrative begins, let the pace of the story settle softly around you. If the quiet unfolding of history brings rest, you are welcome to linger here. You may also support the continuation of these sleep-focused journeys by liking the video, subscribing to the channel, or sharing where you're listening from tonight. All of it helps this peaceful exploration of the past continue, and now the story turns toward the secluded valleys of Vermont, where the life of Calvin Coolidge began in stillness and simplicity. In the small village of Plymouth Notch, tucked gently into the hills of central Vermont, the future president was born on July 4th, 1872. The landscape surrounding the community carried a sense of permanence, rolling fields, wooded slopes, and quiet dirt roads that wound patiently through the terrain. Life moved according to the predictable rhythms of the seasons, with winters long and reflective, and summers offering long stretches of light across the pastures and farmsteads. And it was a place where self-reliance was not an aspiration, but a natural part of daily living, shaped by the land and the modest resources it provided. The home into which he was born was simple and orderly, reflecting the character of the family who lived there. His father, John Coolidge, served as a farmer, shopkeeper, and public official, taking on roles that required trust and steady attention. Among his responsibilities was service in the Vermont legislature, a position he fulfilled with a calm sense of duty. His mother, Victoria, contributed to the household with quiet devotion, caring for her children and managing the needs of a rural family in an era that demanded perseverance from every member of a household. The environment in which the young Coolidge grew was one shaped by restraint and consistency. In Plymouth Notch, conversations were thoughtful rather than hurried, and neighbours understood one another through long familiarity. The winters encouraged indoor work, mending, reading, and reflecting. The summers brought steady labour in fields and gardens. These patterns created a world where order was valued and where one learned to appreciate what could be accomplished through patience rather than haste. The Coolidge family home served as both a residence and a centre of local interaction. The general store and the post office, operated by his father, brought occasional movement from neighbouring farms, providing glimpses of the wider region while maintaining the village's measured identity. These visits connected the Coolidge household to distant towns and national events, yet the flow of information remained calm, absorbed into daily life without disruption. His early years were marked by both gentle steadiness and quiet sorrow. When he was just 12, his mother passed away after a period of declining health. Her loss created a solemn shift within the household. Though his father continued to guide the family with dependable resolve, the absence of his mother left an imprint that would remain throughout Coolidge's life. A few years later, the passing of his younger sister added another layer of stillness to his early memories. These experiences of loss, encountered in the quiet of rural Vermont, encouraged a reflective nature already present in him, deepening the inward calm that would later define his public demeanour. Education in Plymouth Notch unfolded in a modest schoolhouse, where lessons were direct and expectations were clear. The curriculum emphasised fundamentals, reading, writing, arithmetic, combined with a sense of civic responsibility appropriate to the region's traditions. Coolidge approached his studies with diligence rather than outward enthusiasm, developing habits of steady work and careful thought. Teachers noted his seriousness and consistency, qualities that emerged not through ambition, but through quiet determination. Even as a child, he displayed a preference for listening over speaking. Conversations were approached thoughtfully, and his responses were measured. This trait was well suited to the environment of rural Vermont, where words were often chosen carefully, not to impress but to convey meaning with clarity. His temperament, shaped by both personality and circumstance, aligned naturally with the values of his community. The physical world around him also contributed to the formation of his early character. The long stretches of countryside, the sound of wind moving through trees, and the slow transitions of the seasons offered a setting that encouraged contemplation. In such surroundings, days were not hurried. Responsibilities were fulfilled through steady work, and leisure consisted largely of simple, restorative moments, walking the fields, reading by lamplight, or observing the quiet changes of weather. As he grew older, Coolidge began assisting his father with small tasks, learning practical skills essential to rural life. He tended animals, worked in the store, and observed the careful bookkeeping required to manage community affairs. Through these activities, he absorbed a sense of responsibility that extended beyond personal tasks to include the well-being of the larger community. Public service in this setting was not a pursuit of prestige but a natural extension of daily living. These early years in Plymouth Notch formed the foundation of his character, a foundation marked by modesty, restraint, and an appreciation for order. The landscape, the family home, the rhythms of rural life, and the quiet lessons of loss all contributed to a temperament that valued steadiness above display. This beginning, far removed from the noisy currents of national politics, provided the grounding that would shape every chapter of his future. In the years following his earliest memories, Calvin Coolidge continued to grow within the steady calm of Plymouth Notch. Surrounded by the quiet patterns of rural life in late 19th century Vermont, the community offered a form of constancy that shaped both his habits and his understanding of the world. Neighbours lived close enough to share familiar rhythms, yet far enough apart for each household to maintain its own peaceful order. In this setting, the young Coolidge absorbed lessons not from spectacle or urgency, but from the unhurried routines that defined each day. His childhood unfolded within this steady environment, marked by the balance of modest responsibilities and thoughtful observation. He was not known for outward exuberance. Instead, he carried a restraint that felt natural rather than imposed. Those who knew him saw a quiet boy who listened more than he spoke, someone who weighed his words before offering them. This habit was not yet the hallmark of a future public figure. It was simply an aspect of his personality, encouraged by the measured tone of the household in which he lived. The loss of his mother at an early age deepened this inwardness. Her passing brought a stillness into the family home that lingered for years, creating moments of reflection that became woven into the fabric of his upbringing. His father, steady and disciplined, continued to guide him, but the absence of maternal warmth left an impression that shaped the contours of his emotional landscape. He formed close bonds with the surviving members of his family, yet his reactions to the world remained tempered by an early awareness of fragility. A few years later, the death of his younger sister added to this sense of quiet solemnity. These experiences were met without outward display, as was customary in a community where sorrow was acknowledged privately and carried with dignity. Coolidge learned to process emotion through reflection rather than outward expression. In time, this approach would become characteristic of his adult demeanour, lending a certain calm to his interactions and shaping the manner in which he confronted challenges. Schooling in rural Vermont reflected the values of the region: practicality, discipline, and a respect for foundational knowledge. The schoolhouse was modest, with wooden desks, simple teaching tools, and lessons oriented toward the essentials. Reading, writing, and arithmetic formed the core of instruction, supplemented by history and civics in their most basic forms. Teachers expected attentiveness, and students learned to work through assignments with patience. Coolidge approached his studies with seriousness. He was not a student who sought attention, nor did he excel through force of personality. Instead, he cultivated a methodical approach to learning, absorbing information steadily and applying it with care. His teachers noted his diligence and his ability to focus for extended periods. These habits, formed early in life, contributed to the disciplined thought processes he would later bring to public office. Outside of school hours, childhood in Plymouth Notch remained intertwined with the demands of seasonal labour. Coolidge participated in the work of maintaining the family farm, bringing in firewood, tending to livestock, assisting in small repairs, and supporting the routines that sustained the household. These tasks, performed in the company of family, reinforced a sense of collective responsibility. Each contribution, however small, helped maintain the equilibrium of daily life. In this environment, he learned that quiet, consistent effort could be as meaningful as more visible accomplishments. The general store operated by his father exposed him to the wider network of local relationships. As neighbours visited for supplies, postal services, or brief moments of conversation, Coolidge observed the way his father interacted with members of the community. The elder Coolidge approached each interaction with measured courtesy, offering practical advice when needed and maintaining an aura of dependability. These encounters demonstrated to the young boy how public trust was earned, not through display, but through the steady fulfillment of daily commitments. And books also played a modest but important role in Coolidge's development. The family library was not extensive, yet it contained materials that encouraged reflection, biographies, histories, essays, and collections of speeches. These volumes introduced him to the lives of earlier statesmen and thinkers, lending form to his understanding of civic responsibility. Reading became a quiet refuge, a place where he could explore ideas beyond the boundaries of the village. He developed a preference for clear, concise writing, a style that reflected both his personality and the literary influences of his youth. Though reserved by nature, Coolidge was not isolated. He formed friendships with classmates and neighbours, joining them in modest recreations suited to rural life. Games, walks through the nearby woods, and seasonal activities provided opportunities for companionship, though he tended toward reflection even in moments of leisure. His sense of humour, understated and dry, emerged occasionally, revealing a gentleness beneath his quiet exterior. Religious life also played a consistent role in shaping his early years. The local church, simple in structure and practice, emphasized humility, self-discipline, and the quiet virtues that guided daily living. Services were unadorned, offering moments of contemplation rather than emotional display. These experiences reinforced the values of restraint and duty that permeated the community. Coolidge absorbed them naturally, finding in them a structure that harmonized with his own disposition. As he matured into adolescence, the rhythms of Plymouth Notch remained steady, yet his world began to widen, where he progressed through his schooling with consistent effort, and his teachers recognized his readiness for more advanced studies. Conversations within the household increasingly turned toward the possibility of further education. His father, understanding the importance of opportunity, supported the idea of sending him beyond the village to pursue academic advancement. Before leaving Plymouth Notch, however, Coolidge continued to contribute to the household in ways both practical and reflective. He developed skills in bookkeeping, learned the careful management of small enterprises, and observed the responsibilities inherent in public service through his father's occasional duties. These experiences formed the groundwork for his later understanding of government, not as an abstract institution, but as a series of duties requiring meticulous attention. By the time he prepared to leave for more formal schooling, Coolidge carried with him a set of traits forged quietly in the hills of Vermont: discipline, restraint, attentiveness, and a deep appreciation for order. These qualities, shaped by the modest demands of rural life and the understated guidance of his family, would accompany him through every stage of his journey. They provided the foundation upon which his public career would rest, serving as a steady compass in times of both quiet administration and national challenge. When Calvin Coolidge left the quiet landscape of Plymouth Notch to pursue higher education, he entered a world that was broader, more varied, and filled with new intellectual possibilities. His destination was Amherst College, a place known for its rigorous academics and its emphasis on clear thinking and disciplined study. The move from the stillness of rural Vermont to the more active environment of western Massachusetts marked a significant transition, yet the qualities he carried — restraint, attentiveness, and steady determination — placed him well within the rhythm of collegiate life. Arriving at Amherst, Coolidge encountered a setting that encouraged exploration. The campus, with its orderly paths and modest but dignified buildings, offered both structure and openness. Students from various regions brought with them different perspectives, broadening the range of ideas to which he was exposed. Though surrounded by greater activity than he had known before, Coolidge did not approach the experience with outward excitement. Instead, he stepped into academic life quietly, observing its pace before fully engaging with it. During his early months, he devoted himself to learning the expectations of his courses. Amherst's curriculum emphasized clarity of thought, precise use of language, and an understanding of the classical foundations of Western education. Coolidge applied his disciplined habits to these demands, approaching each assignment with the careful attention he had cultivated since childhood. His reserved nature allowed him to focus deeply, and he soon gained a reputation among classmates for his reliability and methodical approach. One of the most influential figures in his academic experience was Professor Charles Garman, whose philosophy courses shaped Coolidge's developing worldview. Garman encouraged students to think beyond the surface of problems, and to consider foundational principles, and to recognize the ethical dimensions of decision-making. These lectures, delivered with clarity and moral seriousness, resonated with Coolidge's reflective temperament. He later spoke of Garman's influence as one of the formative experiences of his youth, noting how the professor's quiet conviction helped guide his understanding of civic responsibility. Coolidge also developed an appreciation for literature during his time at Amherst. He read works from classical authors, British essayists, and American writers, absorbing their styles and refining his own capacity for precise expression. Although naturally reserved, he found in reading a mode of engagement that suited him well, one that allowed contemplation without requiring outward display. This interest in language later influenced the clarity and simplicity of his public addresses, many of which reflected the understated elegance he encountered in his studies. Social life at Amherst moved at a pace somewhat faster than Coolidge was accustomed to, yet he found his place within it gradually. He joined the debate team, a venture that required him to step beyond his inherent quietness and articulate arguments before an audience. Although he never became an imposing orator, he learned to speak with clarity and purpose, refining a style that would later distinguish him in public office. His arguments tended toward conciseness, reflecting an instinct to remove excess and present ideas in their essential form. Coolidge also became involved in the campus literary society and the student newspaper. These roles required writing with regularity, offering him opportunities to develop his skill in presenting ideas through measured prose. His contributions were not flamboyant but steady, demonstrating a calm command of language and an ability to convey meaning through understatement. These early experiences with written communication foreshadowed the precision that would become a hallmark of his political correspondence. Financial considerations shaped his college years as well. Though Amherst offered scholarships and work opportunities, Coolidge remained mindful of the need to manage expenses carefully. He lived simply, often performing extra tasks or adopting frugal habits to ensure that he could continue his studies. This experience, though challenging at times, reinforced a sense of prudence that had been part of his upbringing. He learned to balance academic demands with practical necessities, maintaining order in both. During summer breaks, Coolidge returned to Vermont, where he worked in various capacities to support his education. Whether engaged in small jobs or assisting in local affairs, he used this time to reconnect with the quiet routines of home. These periods of return helped him maintain a sense of continuity between his past and present, grounding him amid the growing complexity of his academic life. As he progressed through his college years, Coolidge began to consider his future more carefully. Several professors recognized in him the habits suited to public service: steady work, respect for order, and a thoughtful nature. Although he didn't yet present himself as a future political figure, the idea of studying law began to take shape. The law seemed to offer a path in which clarity of thought, disciplined analysis, and modest public engagement could coexist, qualities that aligned naturally with his temperament. Friendships formed during these years, though quiet in nature, became important foundations of support. Coolidge valued companionship rooted in shared respect rather than boisterousness. He cultivated relationships with fellow students who appreciated his seriousness, his dry humor, and his understated reliability. These friendships extended beyond graduation, forming a network of individuals who later observed his public career with familiarity and calm recognition. As his final year approached, Coolidge felt the gentle conclusion of this chapter. Graduation did not arrive with dramatic celebration, but with a sense of steady progression. Then he completed his coursework, participated in ceremonies, and prepared to take the next step toward professional life. His time at Amherst had neither transformed him nor altered his essential disposition. Instead, it had refined what already existed, offering structure, intellectual depth, and a broader perspective on the responsibilities that awaited him. When he left Amherst, he carried with him the quiet confidence of someone who understood his own nature. He did not seek prominence, but he possessed the habits required for a life of thoughtful service. The years ahead would lead him into law, local government, and eventually national office. Yet throughout those later experiences, the lessons of Amherst, discipline, clarity, restraint, and reflective judgment, remained woven into his approach. The move from the rural fields of Vermont to the quiet halls of Amherst College had been his first major journey outward. It expanded his understanding of the world without unsettling his inward calm. The transition that followed, from college to the study of law, would continue this gentle widening of horizons, guiding him step by step toward a life devoted to public duty. After completing his studies at Amherst, Calvin Coolidge began the next quiet, deliberate phase of his life, the study of law. Rather than attending a formal law school, as many aspiring attorneys later would, he chose the traditional method of reading law under the guidance of an established practitioner. This approach suited him. It allowed for steady study, patient reflection, and a gradual absorption of the principles that formed the foundation of legal practice. With a sense of purpose tempered by modesty, he moved to the town of Northampton, a place that would become his home for the rest of his life. Northampton was larger and more active than Plymouth Notch or Amherst, yet it preserved enough quiet structure to feel familiar. The streets carried the rhythm of a growing small city, where shops, offices and public buildings supported an expanding community. Coolidge entered this environment with characteristic reserve. He walked its streets without seeking notice, finding in its atmosphere a balance between the opportunities of civic life and the calm necessary for study. He began his apprenticeship in the office of Hammond and Field, a respected law firm that provided him with the guidance required to understand the daily work of attorneys. The firm handled a range of matters: property issues, business affairs, wills and disputes, giving Coolidge exposure to the practical concerns of ordinary citizens. He approached each task with meticulous care, reading widely, asking measured questions and learning the importance of precision in drafting documents. Legal apprenticeship demanded discipline rather than display. There were no examinations to impress professors, no lectures to absorb in large halls. Instead, Coolidge spent long hours reviewing statutes, reading case law, and preparing documents under the watchful eye of senior attorneys. His steady progress revealed his growing understanding of both the technical and human dimensions of legal practice. He understood that the law existed not only in statutes and precedent, but also in its effect on the lives of community members who sought guidance during uncertain moments. Outside the office, his life settled into a simple routine. He lived modestly, renting a room and managing expenses with the same care he had learned during his college years. Evenings were often spent reading, studying, or walking the quiet streets of Northampton. He developed a familiarity with the town's public spaces, its courthouse, churches, stores, and quiet residential lanes, absorbing the texture of the community he would eventually serve. Coolidge soon entered the next step of his professional path: admission to the bar. After demonstrating sufficient knowledge and competence, he received the approval necessary to begin practicing law independently. The milestone arrived without ceremony, yet it marked the beginning of a career that would entwine him with the civic life of Northampton for decades to come, as he opened his own law office in the Smith Charities building, a location that placed him at the heart of the town's professional community. His early years as an attorney were marked by steady, modest work. He represented clients seeking clarity in property disputes, assisted families in preparing wills, and helped businesses navigate legal obligations. He approached each case patiently, avoiding unnecessary rhetoric, focusing instead on careful documentation and clear reasoning. His clients recognized his dependability and the quiet assurance with which he carried out his responsibilities. As he established himself professionally, Coolidge also began integrating into the civic rhythms of Northampton. He joined local organizations, attended community gatherings, and gradually became a familiar figure at public events. Though naturally reserved, he believed in the importance of contributing to the well-being of the community. His participation in these groups was quiet, marked by attendance rather than prominence. Yet over time, his steady presence and thoughtful demeanour made an impression on those who interacted with him. Coolidge's entry into local politics began gently, without fanfare. He saw public service as an extension of the values he had learned in Vermont, a duty undertaken not for personal advancement, but for the orderly functioning of community life. His first elected position was on the Northampton City Council, where he served with the same modesty and diligence he brought to his legal work. He listened carefully during meetings, reviewed proposals with attention, and offered comments only when he believed they contributed directly to clarity or efficiency. His approach to local politics reflected a belief that governance should be steady, predictable, and respectful of existing structures. He did not seek to reform for its own sake. Instead, he aimed to understand the needs of the town and respond to them with measured judgment. This manner of service encouraged trust. council members and residents alike observed that his contributions were guided not by ambition, but by a desire for order and fairness. During these early political years, Coolidge also deepened his personal connections. Northampton had become more than a place of work. It was a community in which he felt a sense of belonging. He formed friendships, participated in civic life, and began envisioning a future rooted in the town's steady environment. These experiences provided the foundation for his later, more prominent roles, reinforcing habits of thoughtful engagement and quiet leadership. His personal life changing gently, he would soon meet Grace Goodhue, a teacher at the Clark School for the Deaf. Their first encounters were simple, unassuming, and reflective of the calm rhythms that defined his life. Though their story would unfold gradually, its beginnings took place during this early chapter in Northampton, a period marked by foundational developments, both personal and professional. By the end of his apprenticeship and initial years in practice, Coolidge had established himself firmly within Northampton. He had gained the trust of clients, colleagues and neighbours. Then he had taken his first steps into public service, guided by a belief in restrained governance and civic responsibility. He had begun building a life grounded in routine, reflection, and community involvement. This quiet consolidation of purpose and place formed the platform from which he would ascend, first through local offices, then to the state legislature, and eventually to the highest roles in Massachusetts and the nation. Yet at this stage, nothing about his path felt hurried or predetermined. Each step grew naturally from the last, guided by steady habits and a deep appreciation for the orderly progression of life. Calvin Coolidge's gradual entry into public life unfolded with the same quiet steadiness that had marked every earlier chapter of his development. Having established himself in Northampton as a dependable young attorney, he began to accept responsibilities that connected him more intimately with the civic functioning of the town. These early public roles did not require grand gestures or sweeping rhetoric. Instead, they demanded careful listening, attention to detail, and a measured temperament, qualities that Coolidge possessed instinctively. His first formal step into politics came when he accepted the invitation to serve on the Northampton City Council, taking a seat that offered a modest introduction to municipal governance. The issues before the council were practical ones, matters of street maintenance, budgets, ordinances, and the efficient administration of local services. Coolidge approached each task with deliberate care, studying documents thoroughly and reserving comment until he had formed a clear understanding. In an era when meetings could easily drift into debate or repetition, he became known for speaking only when his contribution could clarify or conclude a matter. This restraint earned him early respect. Coolidge viewed local government as an extension of community duty, consistent with the traditions of small New England towns. Public service, in his understanding, was something citizens accepted when called upon, not a platform for personal display. His colleagues observed that he neither sought attention nor hid from responsibility. Instead, he focused on ensuring that ordinances were clear, budgets balanced, and public needs met without unnecessary expenditure. His legal training supported this approach, helping him interpret statutes and prepare concise reports that facilitated orderly decision-making. After serving on the council, Coolidge accepted election as City Solicitor of Northampton, a position that placed him at the intersection of law and municipal administration. As solicitor, he advised city officials on legal matters, reviewed contracts, evaluated proposed regulations, and ensured that all municipal actions complied with state law. This role demanded careful reasoning and a thorough understanding of statutory requirements. Coolidge performed these responsibilities with characteristic precision, preparing written opinions that reflected both clarity and restraint. In this capacity, Coolidge often worked closely with the city's mayor, department heads, and the town's legislative bodies. The work was practical rather than political, involving matters such as property disputes, licensing questions, and the drafting of ordinances. Each issue required patient analysis, and Coolidge approached them without haste. His memoranda were noted for their calm tone and their attention to detail. Officials who consulted him frequently remarked on his dependability and his ability to resolve questions efficiently, without unnecessary complication. These early positions helped Coolidge become better acquainted with the structure and rhythm of municipal governance. He attended meetings, reviewed budgets, and observed how different departments collaborated to serve the community. Through this experience, he developed a deeper understanding of public administration, how small inefficiencies could accumulate, how clear processes reduce confusion, and how restraint in spending preserved stability. These insights formed the foundation of his later fiscal philosophy, which emphasized balance, simplicity, and responsibility. During this period, Coolidge also began to participate in the political life of the Massachusetts Republican Party, though in a quiet and measured manner. He attended local gatherings not to make speeches but to listen and learn. His reserved nature distinguished him from more demonstrative personalities, yet his reliability and steadiness gradually made him a trusted figure within the local branch. Party members observed that he approached political questions with the same seriousness he brought to legal matters, evaluating them through a lens of practicality rather than ambition. Coolidge's public standing in Northampton grew gradually. Residents came to know him as a thoughtful young man who could be relied upon to handle duties with care, and his office in the Smith Charities Building became a quiet hub where clients, colleagues, and civic leaders could find him engaged in steady work. There were no dramatic campaigns or sweeping initiatives during this phase. Instead, his influence expanded through a consistent presence, attending meetings, assisting with legal matters, and offering calm guidance when needed. In time, Coolidge was elected to the Northampton School Committee, a role that broadened his understanding of public needs and administrative challenges. Education had always held personal significance for him, shaped by his years of thoughtful study at Amherst. As a committee member, he reviewed budgets, considered curriculum proposals, and evaluated the needs of teachers and students, and his contributions reflected his belief that schools required stability and careful planning. He supported measures that balanced educational quality with fiscal responsibility, recognizing that both were essential to the well-being of the community. Coolidge's approach to public service emphasized preparation. Before each meeting, he studied documents thoroughly, making notes and considering various interpretations. During discussions, he listened patiently, allowing others to speak first. He did not interrupt, nor did he seek to steer conversations toward predetermined outcomes. Instead, he offered his thoughts when they might clarify a question or help move deliberations toward resolution. Over time, colleagues came to understand that his silence indicated attentiveness, and his comments signaled careful consideration. These early experiences also shaped his understanding of leadership. Coolidge believed that authority should be exercised quietly, with respect for established processes and the input of colleagues. He viewed government not as an arena for personal advancement, but as a structure designed to provide stability and continuity. This philosophy aligned with the traditions of New England town governance, where community decisions were often reached through consensus, and where flamboyance was viewed with caution. Outside of formal responsibilities, Coolidge continued to build relationships throughout Northampton. He visited local businesses, attended community events, and maintained a modest social presence. His interactions were marked by courtesy and reserve, reflecting the understated habits of his upbringing. Friends and acquaintances often noted his dry, gentle humour, which emerged in brief, thoughtfully timed remarks rather than extended stories or conversation. As Coolidge's reputation grew, So did the recognition of his potential for higher office. Community members respected his consistency, his integrity, and his quiet dedication to public duty. Though he did not actively seek advancement, the natural progression of his service led to increasing responsibilities. Local leaders began encouraging him to consider roles beyond the boundaries of Northampton, noting his suitability for positions that demanded clear thinking and steady judgment. By the end of this phase, Coolidge had established a pattern of public service grounded in modesty and restraint. The foundations of his later career, diligence, clarity, fiscal prudence, and a profound respect for orderly governance, had taken firm shape. His journey from rural Vermont to the civic life of Northampton had deepened his understanding of community needs and the quiet authority of stable administration. These early steps, taken without haste or ambition, would guide him steadily toward the broader responsibilities awaiting him in the years ahead. As Calvin Coolidge's reputation in Northampton continued to grow, the community began to look to him as a figure capable of guiding the town with steadiness and restraint. His years of service on the city council, as city solicitor, and on the school committee had established him as a dependable presence, someone who approached public responsibilities thoughtfully and without display. When the opportunity arose for him to run for mayor, it was a natural progression, in not the result of a forceful campaign, but rather of the town's quiet recognition of his qualities. Accepting the role, he stepped into a position that required balanced judgment, careful financial stewardship, and a calm understanding of community needs. Northampton, at the start of the 20th century, was a town that blended rural surroundings with the modest growth of a small city. Its streets supported local businesses, its residents participated in civic life, and its institutions, schools, churches, and public services reflected the values of New England practicality. To lead such a community did not demand grand gestures, it demanded steadiness. Coolidge understood this instinctively. As mayor, he approached each responsibility with the same discipline he had applied throughout his earlier career. One of the central tasks of his administration involved managing the town's finances. Northampton, like many municipalities, faced the ongoing challenge of maintaining essential services while keeping budgets balanced. Coolidge reviewed financial documents with meticulous care, examining expenditures and revenues, and ensuring that appropriations aligned with actual needs. He resisted unnecessary spending, believing that public funds should be used efficiently and sparingly. This philosophy did not reflect austerity for its own sake, but rather a conviction that communities remained stable when their finances were managed prudently. Under his guidance, municipal operations proceeded with clarity and order. City departments found in him a leader who valued consistent performance and respectful cooperation. That he encouraged officials to communicate directly and to resolve issues through structured processes rather than through improvisation. This approach fostered a sense of reliability within local government, reassuring the community that essential services, public works, safety, sanitation, were being managed with measured attention. Public works projects received particular focus during his tenure. Streets required maintenance, sewer systems needed improvement, and public buildings demanded upkeep. Coolidge evaluated these needs carefully, prioritizing projects based on urgency and available funds. He believed strongly in maintaining the infrastructure necessary for community well-being, yet he balanced these priorities with the responsibility of keeping municipal debt at manageable levels. His decisions reflected a belief that progress should be steady rather than rapid, ensuring that projects were completed with durability and purpose. Coolidge's leadership style as mayor was characterized by quiet presence rather than public flourish. He attended meetings punctually, listened attentively, and participated in discussions with measured clarity. He rarely raised his voice, nor did he rely on rhetorical embellishment. Instead, he conveyed ideas through conciseness, believing that effective governance depended on clearly defined responsibilities and thoughtful deliberation. Residents observed that debates often settled into a calmer tone when he spoke, as his restrained manner encouraged similar restraint in others. Although naturally reserved, Coolidge understood the importance of being visible to the community. Though he walked through town regularly, visiting businesses, attending public events, and meeting residents in informal settings. His presence reassured citizens that their mayor was attentive to daily life in Northampton. These interactions seldom involved political conversation. They were gestures of connection, affirming the shared identity of a small New England community. The town's cultural and educational institutions also benefited from his measured oversight. Coolidge supported improvements to the school system when financially feasible, recognizing the importance of education in community development. He maintained a close relationship with local educators, listening to their concerns and evaluating their proposals. His approach reflected a belief that strong schools contributed not only to intellectual growth, but also to social stability. Throughout his mayoral term, Coolidge faced occasional challenges, as any administrator would. Certain proposals required delicate handling, and some disagreements among council members demanded careful mediation. Coolidge approached these situations without haste. He gathered information, consulted relevant parties, and allowed discussions to unfold with patience. His decisions, when reached, reflected a balanced consideration of both principles and practical consequences. He was not swayed by pressure or by the desire for public approval. He held firmly to the belief that public office required steadiness even in the face of contention. Community members gradually came to appreciate the predictability of his leadership. Under Coolidge, the town did not experience sweeping changes or dramatic moments. Instead, it experienced continuity, budgets balanced, services maintained, and civic operations conducted with quiet competence. This consistency strengthened public trust, demonstrating that effective governance could be achieved through calm attentiveness rather than energetic reform. It was during this period that Coolidge's personal life deepened as well. His marriage to Grace Goodhue brought warmth and balance into his daily existence. Grace, with her gentle humour and kind presence, complemented his reserved nature. Together they formed a harmonious partnership, participating in community life in a manner that reflected their shared commitment to modesty and public service. Their home in Northampton became a place of steadiness, grounded in daily routines that matched Coolidge's temperament. As his mayoral term drew to a close, Coolidge had neither sought attention nor avoided responsibility. He had simply done the work required of him, achieving practical outcomes without pursuing personal acclaim. The quiet success of his administration did not go unnoticed. Residents, colleagues, and party members recognized that his leadership reflected qualities valuable beyond Northampton. They saw in him a figure capable of rising through the broader structures of Massachusetts government, bringing with him the same commitment to order and restraint. By the time he left the mayor's office, Coolidge had formed a clear sense of his own approach to public service. He believed in incremental progress, financial discipline, and the quiet dignity of fulfilling duties with care. These principles, established firmly during his years in Northampton, would accompany him as he moved into state politics. The steps ahead, first into the Massachusetts legislature, then into higher roles, would continue this measured ascent, guided always by the habits and values he had developed in the town he called home. As Calvin Coolidge completed his quiet, steady service as mayor of Northampton, the natural progression of his public life pointed toward broader responsibilities. His reputation for careful judgment, financial restraint, and balanced administration had reached beyond the boundaries of the town. Community members, colleagues, and party leaders recognized in him a temperament well suited to the thoughtful deliberation required at the state level. With characteristic modesty, Coolidge accepted this gradual widening of duty, stepping into roles within the Massachusetts legislature that would deepen his experience in public affairs. His first step into statewide office came with election to the Massachusetts House of Representatives. The environment he entered was more complex than the familiar chambers of Northampton's local government. Here, he encountered a wider array of voices, each representing communities with distinct needs and priorities. The sessions unfolded with greater formality, and the debates, though still grounded in New England restraint, carried broader implications. Coolidge observed this carefully, is seeking first to understand the rhythms of legislative life before asserting his own presence. In the House, he applied the same habits that had guided him at the municipal level. He prepared thoroughly before each session, reading bills in detail, evaluating their implications, and organizing his thoughts with deliberate care. He didn't speak frequently, and when he did, his remarks were concise and grounded in practical reasoning. His colleagues came to recognize that his contributions were driven not by political flourish, but by attentive study and an interest in clarity. Over time, this earned him respect not just within his own party, but among members across the chamber. Committee work became an important part of his legislative life. Coolidge approached each assignment, whether addressing municipal issues, budgetary concerns, or regulatory questions, with patience and precision. He understood that the substance of governance often unfolded in the quiet spaces between public debates, in the drafting of language, and the careful examination of evidence. His methodical approach contributed to the smooth functioning of committees and allowed him to gain deeper insight into the processes that sustained the state government. As he served, Coolidge became more visible within the party, though he never sought attention for its own sake. His reliability made him a valued participant in discussions about legislation and party positions. He remained grounded in the principles that had shaped his earlier service: fiscal responsibility, clear laws, and respect for established procedures. These principles resonated with many in the legislature, especially those who valued stability during decades of social and economic change. After his service in the House, Coolidge advanced to the Massachusetts Senate, where the scope of his responsibilities widened further. The Senate chamber, smaller and more select, offered opportunities for deeper engagement with the complexities of state governance. The issues before the Senate often involved long-term planning and broader coordination across multiple levels of administration. Coolidge approached these responsibilities with the same calm deliberation that had defined his earlier roles. One of his significant contributions during this period was his involvement in budgetary matters. The Senate's committees on finance and appropriations required members to evaluate the state's fiscal condition with care. Coolidge reviewed financial documents thoroughly, assisting in the development of budgets that balanced necessary expenditures with prudent restraint. He believed firmly in the principle that government should live within its means, and he worked quietly to ensure that state finances remained stable and comprehensible. His colleagues noticed his capacity for order and his preference for clarity. When disagreements arose, Coolidge remained composed, offering his perspective in a measured tone. He did not express judgment of others' motives. Rather, he focused on the specific details of legislation and the long-term impact of decisions. His calm presence often steadied discussions, reminding others of the value of patient deliberation. Coolidge's leadership abilities gradually came into greater recognition, and he was elected president of the Massachusetts Senate, a position that required him to guide proceedings, maintain decorum, and ensure the smooth advancement of legislative business. As presiding officer, he demonstrated an even stronger commitment to fairness and order. He enforced rules consistently, allowed debate to unfold without unnecessary interruption, and maintained a steady pace that allowed the Senate to complete its work with dignity. During his tenure as Senate President, Coolidge oversaw sessions that addressed a wide range of issues. He facilitated discussions on education, infrastructure, public health, and the regulation of industries vital to the state's economy. His role demanded attentiveness to both procedure and substance. He fulfilled these responsibilities without altering his essential temperament: calm, reserved, and focused. Coolidge also deepened his connections with local leaders throughout Massachusetts. As his duties expanded, he traveled to various towns and cities, listening to concerns and observing conditions directly. These interactions broadened his understanding of the state's diversity, from industrial centers to rural communities. Though he remained quiet in demeanor, he absorbed the details of each region's needs, integrating this knowledge into his legislative perspective. Throughout these years, Coolidge's personal life remained a source of balance. His marriage to Grace provided him with steady companionship and warmth, counterbalancing the demands of public service. Their home in Northampton remained a grounding place, offering him rest and familiarity during periods of legislative activity. The predictability of their routine, a simple household, quiet evenings, shared responsibilities, served as the backdrop against which his public duties unfolded. As Coolidge's legislative career continued, the public increasingly saw him as a figure who embodied the values of New England governance: restraint, responsibility, and a steady commitment to civic duty. His advancement to higher roles did not stem from ambition, but from the trust he had earned through consistent, thoughtful service. By the time he completed his term as Senate President, he was widely regarded as a leader capable of guiding the state through broader challenges. The gradual, unhurried rise from local government in Northampton to leadership roles in the Massachusetts legislature formed a clear arc of development, where each step strengthened the habits of discipline and reflection that would later define his governorship and national leadership. Coolidge emerged from this period not through dramatic transformation, but through the steady refinement of qualities he had carried since youth. When Calvin Coolidge ascended to the governorship of Massachusetts, he entered a role that demanded clear judgment, steady administration, and a temperament capable of maintaining calm during unsettled times. His rise to this position followed naturally from his years of legislative service. Colleagues, citizens, and state leaders had come to respect his quiet consistency, his careful reasoning, and his ability to approach public matters without haste or drama. As governor, he carried these same qualities into a broader arena, guiding the state through a period of social transition and economic change. Massachusetts, in the early 20th century, was a state marked by both tradition and transformation. Its older industries continued to operate in textile mills, factories, and shipyards, while newer forms of commerce and technology emerged across urban centers. Communities varied widely, from the bustling streets of Boston to the quiet rural towns of the western counties. This diversity required a governor who could balance different needs without favoring one region over another. Coolidge approached this task with the same disciplined neutrality that had guided him throughout his career. Upon assuming office, he focused first on understanding the administrative structure of the executive branch. Coolidge believed deeply in organization and clarity. He reviewed departmental reports, met with agency heads, and examined the processes by which the state carried out its duties. Rather than impose sweeping changes, he aimed to refine existing systems, improving efficiency where possible, and ensuring that departments operated within the limits of their budgets. His philosophy rested on the conviction that government functioned best when responsibilities were clearly defined and expenditures carefully managed. One of the early hallmarks of his administration was his attention to fiscal stability. Coolidge understood that economic fluctuations could strain public finances, and that responsible budgeting was essential to the long-term health of the state. He evaluated proposed expenditures with patience, weighing both their immediate necessity and their future impact. When presenting budgets to the legislature, he emphasized moderation and careful use of public funds. He believed that taxpayers deserved assurance that their contributions were being used responsibly, and that government should not take on obligations it could not sustain. Coolidge's approach to social issues during his governorship reflected a similar balance. Massachusetts was home to a diverse population, including many immigrant communities whose voices shaped the social and economic life of the state. Coolidge met these dynamics with respect and restraint, supporting laws that protected public welfare while avoiding measures that encouraged excessive intervention. He recognized the importance of stability in labor relations, public safety and education, and he sought policies that promoted fairness without disrupting established institutions. Education was among the areas that received his thoughtful attention. Coolidge believed that strong schools contributed significantly to the health of the state, preparing future citizens for participation in public life. He supported efforts to improve educational facilities and training, always considering the balance between investment and fiscal responsibility. His engagement with educational matters was consistent with his long-standing respect for disciplined study, a value rooted in both his upbringing and his experience at Amherst. Although he preferred administrative steadiness, Coolidge's tenure as governor coincided with a period of growing labor unrest. Across the nation, workers sought better wages and improved conditions, and Massachusetts was no exception. The balance between labor interests and public order required careful judgment. Coolidge believed in the right of workers to seek fair treatment, yet he also understood that disruptions could affect the broader welfare of society. He attempted to address labor issues through negotiation and clear communication, encouraging all parties to consider the long-term health of their industries and communities. During this period, Coolidge continued to cultivate a leadership style that valued humility and cooperation. He maintained regular contact with legislative leaders, fostering a respectful working relationship based on shared goals rather than partisan contest. His reserved demeanor set a tone of deliberation within the administration, encouraging discussions that remained grounded in practical considerations. His staff and colleagues appreciated his consistency. He rarely altered decisions suddenly or without explanation. Instead, he allowed policies to evolve through patient consideration. Public perception of Coolidge as governor initially reflected acknowledgement rather than enthusiasm. Citizens appreciated his steadiness, though he did not attract broad attention. Yet this calm reception aligned with his preferences. He didn't seek dramatic public acclaim, nor did he attempt to shape a political identity through grand statements. His belief remained unchanged, that public office was a responsibility, not a stage for personal expression. It was only when extraordinary circumstances arose that his measured presence would draw national notice, a development that would come soon enough. Beyond the realm of public duties, his personal life continued its gentle rhythm. His home provided balance and grounding. Evenings spent with Grace offered respite from the demands of the executive office. Their conversations were simple and reflective, often touching on daily events rather than political matters. Coolidge appreciated the constancy of home life, recognizing that a stable household strengthened his capacity for clear administrative judgment. As he continued through his governorship, he gained a deeper understanding of the interconnected nature of state systems, how infrastructure supported commerce, how public safety relied on coordination among agencies, and how the well-being of communities depended on both economic opportunity and thoughtful governance. His approach remained steady, prioritizing clarity, fairness, and efficiency. Though few of his early actions generated widespread attention, they fostered a sense of quiet stability within the state. Coolidge's years as governor thus became an essential period of refinement. He didn't seek to transform Massachusetts, nor did he attempt to define his administration through sweeping reforms. Instead, he strengthened the structural foundations of the state government, ensuring that departments operated effectively and within their means. This chapter of his life prepared him for responsibilities of even greater scale, offering lessons in leadership that would guide him through future national challenges. Finally, by the time the Boston police strike emerged, a moment that would soon draw Coolidge into national prominence, he had already developed the habits of thought and judgment that allowed him to meet the situation with clarity. His steady governorship had not been marked by dramatic events, yet it had provided the calm preparation necessary for what lay ahead. When Calvin Coolidge entered the governorship, he did so with the expectation that his tenure would continue in the calm, administrative rhythm he preferred. Yet in 1919, a single event brought unexpected national attention: the Boston police strike. This episode, though unfolding over only a short period, touched upon broader questions of public order, labour rights, and governmental responsibility. Coolidge approached it with the same deliberate steadiness that had guided his earlier service, finding within its challenges an opportunity to express principles he believed essential to civic life. At the time, Boston was a city experiencing the strains that followed the First World War. Economic adjustments, rising prices, and shifting expectations had unsettled many sectors of society, including law enforcement. The Boston police force, whose duties placed them at the centre of the city's daily safety, had grown dissatisfied with working conditions that had changed little for many years. Wages had not kept pace with the cost of living, and the long hours demanded by their duties created additional pressure. Officers sought improvements through collective organisation, believing that cooperation might bring about meaningful change. And conversations about reform had been ongoing for some time, yet disagreements persisted regarding the appropriate method of addressing grievances. Police officers wished to affiliate with larger labour organisations, while city officials questioned whether those responsible for public safety should join broader unions. As discussions continued, tensions slowly accumulated. No single moment signalled a crisis. Instead, a gradual build-up of unresolved concerns created the conditions in which conflict eventually emerged. The strike began in September of 1919, when a significant portion of the Boston police force walked off the job. Their absence left the city vulnerable. Without the presence of trained officers, incidents of disorder increased, and the uneasy stability of daily life was disrupted. Businesses closed early, yet residents stayed indoors, and city officials attempted to coordinate available resources to maintain safety. Local authorities called upon volunteers and state troops to fill the void, hoping to restore order while addressing the broader implications of the strike. Coolidge, observing these developments from the state capital, understood that the situation carried significance beyond the immediate challenges in Boston. The question before him was whether public safety officers, entrusted with maintaining order, could withdraw from their duties as a means of pursuing labour objectives. He recognised the legitimacy of seeking improved conditions, yet he also believed that certain responsibilities, particularly those tied to public protection, required continuous fulfilment. These beliefs formed the basis of his response. His initial steps involved gathering information. He consulted with officials in Boston, reviewed reports from the state's public safety departments, and studied the legal foundations governing the responsibilities of the police force. Throughout this process, he maintained a calm demeanour, avoiding speculation and responding only after careful evaluation. Coolidge believed that governmental authority must rest on clarity, and he approached the situation with the intention of restoring order, while affirming principles he deemed essential. As the strike continued, the demand for clear leadership intensified. Coolidge authorized the deployment of the Massachusetts State Guard, supplementing local efforts to maintain peace. His decision reflected not a desire for confrontation, but a commitment to ensuring that citizens could carry out their daily lives without fear. He believed that government must act decisively when public safety was at risk, yet his measures remained measured and lawful, grounded in established authority rather than improvised force. Coolidge soon issued a public statement clarifying his view. He affirmed that while workers had the right to seek fair conditions, those entrusted with the safety of the public could not abandon their posts without jeopardizing the welfare of the community. His statement did not criticize individuals personally. Instead, it emphasized the importance of the duties inherent to the profession. By framing the issue in terms of responsibility rather than conflict, he conveyed his belief that certain obligations could not be set aside, even during times of dispute. The city, supported by state forces, gradually regained stability. Volunteers assisted with essential tasks, and the presence of organized troops deterred further disorder. Over time, daily routines resumed, and the immediate sense of uncertainty diminished. Though the strike had created temporary disruption, the calm that followed allowed for reflection on the broader implications of the event. Coolidge's response drew widespread attention far beyond Massachusetts. Many saw in his actions a reaffirmation of the importance of public order, especially during a period when labor movements across the country were reshaping economic and social structures. Others viewed his position as a demonstration of the balance between recognizing legitimate grievances and upholding essential civic responsibilities. In either interpretation, his calm and deliberate approach became a subject of national discussion. The aftermath of the strike involved the reorganization of the Boston police force. Officers who had walked out were not reinstated. New candidates were hired, trained, and given improved conditions, including increased wages and better facilities. Coolidge supported these measures, recognizing that long-term stability required addressing the underlying concerns that had contributed to the strike. Yet he maintained that reform must occur without compromising public safety. For Coolidge personally, the strike marked a turning point. Although he did not seek wider recognition, his measured response positioned him as a figure of national interest. Leaders across the country took note of his ability to articulate a principled stance with clarity and composure. His statement that there is no right to strike against the public safety became associated with his name, not as a slogan, but as a reflection of the quiet convictions that guided him. This moment did not change Coolidge's essential nature. He remained modest, restrained, and focused on carrying out the duties of his office. Yet the episode demonstrated how a calm temperament, grounded in steady principles, could offer clarity during periods of uncertainty. His response to the Boston police strike, shaped by the habits of thought he'd cultivated over decades, stood as an example of leadership derived not from force of personality, but from disciplined reflection and respect for established responsibilities. As the state moved beyond the strike, Coolidge returned to the broader administrative work of the governorship. The quiet stability he preferred gradually resumed, even as the memory of the strike continued to shape public understanding of his leadership. When the immediate effects of the Boston police strike settled, and Massachusetts returned to a more familiar rhythm, Calvin Coolidge resumed his duties as governor with the same calm steadiness that had marked his entire public life. Yet the atmosphere around him had shifted in ways that would gradually become unmistakable. Across the nation, newspapers, political leaders, and civic observers began to take notice of the quiet governor from Massachusetts, whose measured words during a moment of public uncertainty had conveyed a sense of principle and authority. This attention did not arrive abruptly. It accumulated slowly, carried by editorials, discussions within party circles, near and the reflective conversations of citizens who valued order during unsettled times. In the early 20th century, public reputation often spread through printed commentary, rather than dramatic statements, and Coolidge's image grew through this steady stream of written observation. Editorial boards across the country highlighted his calm response to the strike, interpreting it as evidence of a thoughtful leader grounded in responsibility. They emphasized the clarity of his reasoning and the restraint with which he exercised his authority. These qualities contrasted with the more vigorous political styles common in the era, creating a distinct public impression of Coolidge as a figure of quiet steadiness. Despite this rising attention, Coolidge himself remained focused on the day-to-day responsibilities of the governorship. He reviewed budgets, worked with agency heads, and maintained close contact with the legislature. The administrative life he preferred continued as before, grounded in measured study and deliberate judgment. He did not seek opportunities to amplify his public profile. Rather, he allowed whatever attention came to arrive naturally, shaped by the observations of others rather than by his own efforts. Within the Republican National Committee, discussions gradually emerged about potential leaders for future federal roles. The party had long valued figures who displayed steadiness, respect for institutions, and the ability to maintain public trust. Coolidge's conduct during the strike, combined with his years of disciplined public service, aligned with these qualities. Party members considered how such a temperament might contribute to national leadership, particularly during a period when the country was navigating the social and economic adjustments that followed the First World War. As the 1920 presidential election approached, speculation began circulating quietly. There was no campaign from Coolidge, no appeals, and no speaking tours intended to shape public opinion. Instead, his name surfaced through conversations among party leaders who appreciated the balance he demonstrated between assertiveness and restraint. They considered how a figure of his demeanour might complement broader ticket dynamics, especially as national politics increasingly demanded both administrative clarity and public reassurance. Among citizens, the idea of Coolidge as a national figure held a certain appeal. His response to the strike had touched upon themes many found reassuring: respect for public safety, thoughtful acknowledgement of workers' concerns, and a belief in orderly processes. People valued the sense of calm he conveyed and the lack of personal agitation in his decisions. Letters arrived at the governor's office from individuals across the country, some brief, others reflective, expressing appreciation for his approach. Though he did not answer each personally, he read many of them with quiet deliberation, noting the tone of respect rather than excitement. As opportunities emerged for him to speak at events outside Massachusetts, Coolidge accepted only those invitations that aligned with his sense of duty. When he addressed gatherings, his remarks remained simple and precise. He did not adjust his style to match the wider audience. Instead, he maintained the clarity and restraint that had long characterized his communication. This consistency further shaped his public identity. Listeners who expected dramatic oratory instead encountered a speaker whose calm voice emphasized clarity, responsibility, and the dignity of public service. While party leaders considered potential vice presidential candidates for the 1920 ticket, Coolidge's name continued to appear in discussions. The national environment favored individuals capable of restoring a sense of stability after years marked by war, social change, and industrial unrest. His reputation for orderly governance made him an appealing choice. Moreover, his background in New England added geographic balance to potential presidential selections from other regions. Despite the growing momentum, Coolidge did not express ambition for the role. His focus remained on Massachusetts, where he continued to carry out administrative duties with precision. When approached by individuals who hinted at the possibility of national office, He acknowledged their comments with courtesy but refrained from speculation. He believed that opportunities in public service, when appropriate, arose through the judgments of others rather than through self-promotion. As the Republican National Convention approached, delegates travelled to Chicago to deliberate over the party's ticket for the upcoming election. Discussions unfolded over several days, shaped by considerations of regional balance, political temperament, and the nation's needs. Coolidge remained in Massachusetts during these proceedings, maintaining his usual schedule. Yet he did not follow developments with impatience. Rather, he allowed events to unfold with the natural pace of political decision-making. When news arrived that the convention had selected him as the party's nominee for vice president, he received the information with characteristic reserve. There were no public displays of excitement, no dramatic statements, and no sudden shifts in routine. He simply acknowledged the decision, recognizing it as an extension of the responsibilities he had carried for years. To him, the selection represented another step in the steady progression of public duty, an opportunity to serve the nation with the same clarity and restraint he had brought to every earlier role. The announcement brought a quiet sense of recognition across the country. Newspapers published thoughtful commentary, noting that Coolidge's temperament complemented the broader aims of the ticket. Citizens who had observed his leadership from a distance responded with a mixture of curiosity and reassurance. They saw in him a figure who might bring calm judgment to the national stage at a time when the country sought stability and measured progress. In the final months before the election, Coolidge gradually shifted his attention from state administration to the broader responsibilities that awaited him. His preparations, as always, were deliberate and modest. He reviewed national issues, studied public reports, and considered how the vice presidency might allow him to contribute to the well-being of the country. The transition did not mark a departure from the habits that had long defined him. It was simply an expansion of their application. Thus, through a combination of steadiness, reputation, and the thoughtful judgments of others, Calvin Coolidge moved from state leadership into national prominence. The journey had not been marked by ambition or dramatic appeal. Instead, it had unfolded slowly, shaped by the same quiet discipline that guided every aspect of his public life. Calvin Coolidge entered the vice presidency in 1921 with the same measured composure that had guided every earlier chapter of his public life. His election alongside Warren G. Harding brought him to Washington at a time when the nation sought calm after years marked by war, economic adjustment, and social unrest. The country looked toward the future with cautious optimism, hoping for stability and a return to predictable civic rhythms. Coolidge, reserved in manner yet steady in purpose, found himself quietly positioned within the flow of national affairs. The vice presidency in the early 20th century did not carry the extensive administrative responsibilities it later assumed. Instead, it was a role defined by presence, observation, and readiness. Coolidge presided over the Senate, attending its sessions regularly and maintaining decorum during debates. His methodical approach suited this responsibility. He enforced procedural rules with fairness, allowing senators to conduct their deliberations without unnecessary interruption. Observers noted his calm demeanour in the presiding chair, an extension of his natural disposition rather than a cultivated performance. Coolidge's daily routine in Washington reflected the rhythm of a man accustomed to disciplined work. He rose early, reviewed correspondence, and studied legislative materials before attending Senate sessions. Outside the chamber, he maintained a quiet office where he met with lawmakers, advisers, and visitors who sought his perspective. These meetings unfolded without ceremony. Coolidge listened more than he spoke, offering concise responses shaped by careful thought. His interactions revealed a man who valued clarity and restraint even in informal contexts. Washington during the Harding administration possessed an atmosphere of transition. The nation was adjusting to a post-war economy, navigating the return of soldiers to civilian life and confronting shifts in industry and commerce. Harding emphasized stability and cooperation, advocating policies that supported economic recovery and reduced the tensions that had marked earlier years. Coolidge supported these aims, seeing in them a natural extension of the principles he had long upheld: order, responsibility, and moderation. Though the vice presidency offered limited direct authority, it provided Coolidge with the chance to observe federal administration from close proximity. He studied the structure of executive departments, the relationships between agencies, and the ways in which national policies were implemented. This exposure deepened his understanding of the federal government's capacities and limitations. He recognized the importance of coordinated effort across departments and the need for clear lines of responsibility, ideas that had shaped his earlier work in Massachusetts and would later influence his actions as president. Coolidge also traveled during these years, representing the administration at various events across the country. Whether attending dedications, meeting civic leaders, or speaking to local audiences, he approached each occasion with the same gentle seriousness. His speeches remained concise, grounded in themes of public duty and disciplined citizenship. Listeners valued his sincerity, noting that he spoke not to excite but to reassure. He expressed appreciation for the quiet work of communities, emphasizing the importance of cooperation in sustaining national well-being. Despite his reserved manner, Coolidge's relationship with Harding was cordial. Harding valued Coolidge's steadiness and recognized in him a figure who brought balance to the administration. The two men differed in temperament. Harding more affable and expansive, Coolidge more introspective and restrained, yet their partnership functioned smoothly. Coolidge supported the administration's legislative priorities, particularly those aimed at economic recovery, tax reform, and governmental stability. He did so not through public statements, but through quiet cooperation and thoughtful counsel when asked. As vice president, Coolidge continued to deepen his understanding of national issues. He studied reports on agricultural conditions, industrial production, transportation networks, and public finance. He believed that familiarity with factual detail was necessary for any official who might one day be called upon to assume greater responsibility. His methodical review of information reflected not ambition, but preparedness, a recognition that public service required readiness for unforeseen duty. Social life in Washington offered additional opportunities for observation. Coolidge attended official events and receptions as part of his role, moving through gatherings with polite reserve. While these occasions held significance for diplomatic and ceremonial reasons, he neither sought nor avoided the attention they brought. Instead, he viewed them as components of public responsibility. Grace Coolidge, warm and engaging, complemented his quiet presence, forming connections with individuals from a wide range of backgrounds. Her ease in conversation lightened many of Coolidge's official engagements, offering a gentle balance to his natural restraint. During this period, several administrative challenges emerged within the federal government. Investigations into misconduct in certain departments gradually began to surface, hinting at complexities that would later become more visible. Coolidge observed these developments without comment, focusing instead on his own responsibilities. His inclination toward caution kept him from making premature judgments. He remained attentive but reserved, understanding that clear assessment required patience and factual grounding. Throughout his vice presidency, Coolidge maintained ties to Northampton and to Massachusetts. Letters traveled regularly between Washington and New England, carrying updates, reflections, and small notes of daily life. These connections anchored him during his years in the capital, providing continuity with the environments that had shaped his values. When congressional recesses allowed, he returned home for brief visits, finding in familiar surroundings a restorative quiet he had always cherished. Yet, although the vice presidency did not place him at the center of federal decision-making, it provided Coolidge with a vantage point from which to view the nation's unfolding challenges and opportunities. It also placed him within constitutional proximity to the presidency, a fact he acknowledged with solemn awareness. His sense of duty, formed early and refined over decades, ensured that he approached this possibility with neither anticipation nor reluctance, but with an evenness of spirit grounded in preparation. As 1923 began, the Harding administration continued its efforts to support economic recovery and administrative reform. Coolidge fulfilled his duties with quiet diligence, presiding over the Senate, meeting with officials and representing the administration when needed. Indeed, nothing in his manner suggested expectation of imminent change. Yet events would soon unfold that altered the course of his life and the nation's history, drawing him unexpectedly from the steady responsibilities of the vice presidency into the full weight of the presidency itself. During Calvin Coolidge's tenure as vice president, the Harding administration navigated a period marked by both optimism and underlying strain. The early 1920s offered a sense of relief after the upheavals of war, and many Americans hoped for a return to familiar routines. Yet beneath the surface of national life, questions of governmental organization, economic adjustment, and administrative integrity were beginning to emerge. Coolidge observed these developments quietly from his position in the Senate chamber, maintaining his characteristic steadiness as events unfolded around him. President Harding entered office with a commitment to stability and cooperative progress. He emphasized healing, reduction of wartime bureaucracy, and encouragement of business growth. These goals aligned in part with Coolidge's own beliefs in restraint and order, yet Harding's administration also carried the weight of complex inherited challenges, international tensions, domestic demands for reform, and the shifting economic structures of a nation transitioning from war to peace. Coolidge, though not directly responsible for executive decisions, paid close attention to these issues, studying reports and correspondence with his usual deliberation. One of the major efforts of the Harding administration involved re-examining the federal budget. The wartime expenditures had dramatically expanded government operations, and there was broad agreement on the need for more systematic management of federal finances. Harding supported the creation of a formal budget bureau, which would later become the Office of Management and Budget. Coolidge followed these developments closely, recognizing their importance for administrative clarity. The establishment of a structured budget process aligned with principles he had valued throughout his career: transparency, accountability, and orderly planning. Another area of national importance was the administration's approach to international relations. Harding sought engagement through cooperative agreements rather than military alliances, favoring discussions that aimed to reduce armaments and preserve peace. The Washington Naval Conference, held between 1921 and 1922, brought together major powers to address naval limitations and prevent future conflicts. Coolidge observed these diplomatic efforts from a distance, understanding their significance while maintaining his largely ceremonial role. He appreciated the calm and deliberate nature of such negotiations, which mirrored his own preference for reasoned, measured approaches to public affairs. Despite these constructive endeavors, difficulties also arose. Several departments within the federal government faced internal issues that would, over time, become the subject of public scrutiny. These challenges developed gradually, beginning as administrative irregularities before expanding into inquiries that revealed deeper problems. Coolidge did not take part in the executive decisions that contributed to these complexities, as yet he witnessed their emergence with quiet concern. His sense of responsibility required him to remain informed while refraining from public comment prematurely. As questions accumulated, investigations began in various committees and agencies. Reports surfaced regarding mismanagement, improper use of resources, and unethical relationships within certain federal offices. The most notable of these issues originated in the Department of the Interior and the Teapot Dome Oil Reserve, where leases of government oil reserves became the focal point of national inquiry. Although the full extent of the matter had not yet been revealed, early indications signaled that the administration faced significant challenge to public confidence. Coolidge maintained his characteristic restraint. He continued to preside over the Senate with even-handed composure, ensuring that debates remained orderly and that the legislative process proceeded without disruption. He did not allow speculation to alter his routine. Instead, he relied on the principle that clarity emerges through careful investigation, and that public understanding should rest on verified facts rather than early judgments. During this time, Coolidge's relationship with President Harding remained respectful. Harding, aware of the growing strain on his administration, continued to pursue policies aimed at economic stability and international cooperation. He valued Coolidge's calm presence, which contrasted with the pressures that increasingly surrounded the executive office. Though the two men differed in temperament, they found common ground in their shared desire for continuity and orderly governance. Harding's health, however, began to show signs of decline. The demands of the presidency, combined with the mounting pressures of administrative challenges, weighed heavily on him. In 1923, Harding embarked on a long trip across the country, often referred to as the Voyage of Understanding, seeking to strengthen relationships with citizens and explain the goals of his administration. Coolidge remained in Washington, fulfilling vice presidential duties with characteristic steadiness. He monitored national developments quietly, aware that the presidency placed increasing strain on Harding, yet without anticipating the turning point that soon approached. Throughout these months, Coolidge continued to study the workings of government with disciplined attention. He read reports on commerce, agriculture, and transportation. He examined legislative proposals carefully, and he reflected on the responsibilities inherent in executive leadership. Though he expressed no ambition for higher office, he understood the constitutional structure of succession and carried in him an unwavering sense of readiness, shaped by years of methodical preparation. As the Harding administration advanced through its complex mixture of accomplishments and difficulties, Coolidge remained a steady presence. He avoided public controversy, maintained his composure during Senate sessions, and upheld the dignity of the vice presidency through quiet diligence. His perspective on national affairs deepened, was shaped not by direct involvement in crises but by observing their development and considering the administrative lessons they revealed. By mid-1923, the administration found itself at a delicate point. Investigations continued, public questions grew, and Harding's health weakened further. Coolidge, though continuing his duties as vice president, sensed the gravity of the moment. Yet he didn't alter his routine or express anticipation. He remained anchored in his belief that public service required steadiness even in times of uncertainty. Events would soon shift abruptly, altering the course of national leadership and placing Coolidge in a role he had neither sought nor expected. His years of quiet preparation, however, had shaped him for the transition that lay ahead. In the summer of 1923, the Harding administration moved through a season marked by both fatigue and the hope of renewed public connection. President Harding had embarked on an extended tour of western states and Alaska, intended to offer reassurance to the nation and to restore momentum to his administration. The trip, though welcomed by many Americans, revealed the strain he had carried for months. Observers noted moments of exhaustion, tempered by Harding's determination to fulfill his responsibilities. Meanwhile, Calvin Coolidge remained in Washington, carrying out his quiet duties as vice president, presiding over Senate sessions and maintaining the unhurried routine that had long defined his public life. As July progressed, Harding's health deteriorated noticeably. He experienced periods of weakness, prompting concern among members of his travelling party. Yet public statements remained calm, and the full seriousness of his condition was not widely understood. On August 2nd, 1923, while resting at the Palace Hotel in San Francisco, President Harding died unexpectedly. The news spread swiftly across the country, carried through telegraph wires and printed in late edition newspapers. The sense of national shock was immediate, softened only by the quiet dignity with which the country received word of his passing. Coolidge first learned of the president's death at his family home in rural Vermont, where he'd been visiting during a congressional recess. The house, simple, familiar, and deeply connected to the earliest years of his life, stood in the stillness of the Vermont night when a messenger arrived. Coolidge absorbed the information with characteristic composure, but aware that the weight of the presidency had now fallen upon him. There was no elaborate ceremony, no formal procession of officials. The transition occurred in the quiet interior of a farmhouse lit by lamplight, held in the steadiness of Coolidge's modest surroundings. The oath of office was administered shortly after midnight by Coolidge's father, John Coolidge, who was a notary public. The scene unfolded with simplicity. A small group gathered in a narrow room, the subdued glow of an oil lamp illuminating the moment. Coolidge placed his hand upon the family Bible, repeating the words of the constitutional oath with calm precision. There were no speeches, no expressions of triumph, only a solemn acknowledgement of responsibility. The understated nature of the event reflected the character of both Coolidge and the environment in which he stood. In its quietness, the moment conveyed a sense of continuity and constitutional order. After taking the oath, Coolidge spent several hours in reflection. He understood that the presidency, with all its demands, had arrived unexpectedly and under sombre circumstances. His thoughts turned toward the nation, toward its economic needs, its administrative structures, and the uncertainties that lay ahead. He recognized that his leadership would require steadiness, modesty, and careful judgment. These were qualities he had practiced for decades, though never under such immense responsibility. Yet he did not approach the moment with apprehension. His lifelong discipline prepared him to accept duties as they came, though guided by principles rather than ambition. The following morning, Coolidge travelled to Washington to assume his official responsibilities. His arrival in the capital was marked by subdued acknowledgement. Flags flew at half-mast, and the atmosphere carried the tones of national mourning. Federal buildings were draped in quiet symbols of respect for the late president. The offices Coolidge entered, though familiar from his years as vice president, now held a new and weighty significance. He moved through these spaces with calm deliberation, greeting members of the administration and preparing to continue the essential work of government. One of Coolidge's first tasks involved addressing the administrative matters left unsettled by Harding's unexpected death. He met with cabinet members, and many of whom had served with Harding and now faced uncertainty regarding their roles. Coolidge spoke to them with measured steadiness, requesting that they remain in their positions for the time being to ensure continuity. His desire was not to impose immediate changes but to provide stability during a delicate transition. This approach reflected his broader belief that government, particularly in times of unexpected change, should proceed with clarity and restraint. The ongoing investigations into departmental irregularities also required Coolidge's attention. Though he had not been deeply involved in executive decision-making before, he now bore responsibility for addressing the concerns that had emerged. He reviewed reports carefully, consulted advisors, and began forming judgments about the course of administrative correction. His intention was neither to dwell on past difficulties nor to ignore them. Instead, he sought a balanced path forward, grounded in transparency and the orderly functioning of institutions. Coolidge also faced the quiet personal adjustment of occupying the White House. He and Grace moved into a residence shaped by the daily rhythms of national life, but they maintained within it a sense of calm. The routines they established, early mornings, thoughtful correspondence, measured conversations, reflected their enduring approach to responsibility. Grace, warm and steady, provided companionship and support, helping to maintain the quiet tone that Coolidge valued. Public reaction to Coolidge's sudden elevation carried a sense of thoughtful reassurance. Many Americans, already familiar with his conduct during the Boston police strike and his years of disciplined public service, believed he would bring order and stability to the office. Newspapers reflected these sentiments, noting his modest character, his respect for institutions, and his preference for careful decision-making. In a period marked by administrative challenges and public uncertainty, Coolidge's temperament offered a sense of calm. In his early days as president, Coolidge refrained from dramatic policy statements. He chose instead to observe the administrative landscape, gather information, and address immediate concerns with quiet purpose. His guiding principle remained clarity, ensuring that government continued to function without interruption and that public confidence was maintained. He recognized that the presidency demanded not only decisions, but also a tone of steadiness that could shape national sentiment. Coolidge's sudden transition from vice president to president thus unfolded without spectacle, grounded in the quiet integrity of a man whose life had prepared him for responsibility through restraint and discipline. The moment carried historical significance, yet it lacked the dramatic markers that often accompany shifts in national leadership. Instead, it reflected the long-standing American tradition of constitutional continuity, upheld in a small Vermont farmhouse and carried forward with calm purpose into the center of federal life. As Coolidge settled into the presidency, he did so with a clear sense of responsibility and an understanding of the challenges that lay ahead. The months that followed would shape not only his administration, but also the national landscape of the 1920s. Yet in these first moments, what defined his leadership was not policy but presence, a steady, quiet reassurance offered to a nation adjusting to unexpected change. When Calvin Coolidge assumed the presidency in the wake of Harding's sudden death, he approached the responsibilities of the office with a steady composure shaped by decades of disciplined public service. The early days of his administration were marked not by sweeping declarations or immediate reforms, but by careful observation, quiet assessment, and a deliberate effort to restore a sense of calm to national governance. In the midst of public uncertainty, Coolidge understood the importance of continuity. He sought to reassure citizens not through grand gestures, but through the steady rhythm of orderly administration. His first priority involved understanding the full scope of challenges facing the federal government. Though familiar with national issues from his years in Washington, Coolidge now needed to view them through the broader lens of executive responsibility. He devoted long hours to reviewing reports from cabinet departments, studying financial statements, and reading correspondence from across the country. These documents provided him with a comprehensive picture of the nation's administrative needs, its economic patterns, social conditions, and structural demands. Coolidge approached this task with quiet determination, preferring to ground his decisions in facts rather than impressions. One of the most pressing issues involved the integrity of federal departments. Concerns about mismanagement and improper relationships had surfaced during Harding's administration. particularly in matters involving natural resources and the handling of public lands. Coolidge recognized that public confidence depended upon a clear and transparent response. He instructed relevant agencies to cooperate fully with ongoing investigations and ensured that information was made available to congressional committees as required. His aim was not to dramatize the situation, but to allow lawful processes to unfold with precision. Communication played a subtle yet important role in Coolidge's administrative approach. He believed that clarity depended on thoughtful expression, and he dedicated time each day to preparing written statements, messages, and responses. His writing style, shaped by years of deliberate practice, emphasized conciseness and careful selection of words. He avoided emotional tone or rhetorical flourish, presenting ideas in a manner that reflected both respect for the public and confidence in the steadiness of government. His addresses to Congress, though brief compared to those of other presidents, were noted for their clarity and restraint. Coolidge also cultivated a disciplined schedule, understanding that the presidency required consistent engagement with a wide range of responsibilities. Each morning, he began work early, reviewing documents and meeting with advisors. Cabinet meetings occurred regularly, conducted in a manner that encouraged direct communication and efficient decision-making. Coolidge listened attentively during these meetings, speaking only when necessary to clarify direction or to summarize conclusions, and his presence set a tone of deliberation within the cabinet, guiding discussions toward practical outcomes rather than extended debate. One of the administrative principles Coolidge emphasized was the importance of fiscal discipline. He believed that government should operate within its means and should avoid unnecessary expenditures. This belief aligned with the emerging work of the federal budgeting system, which had been established shortly before he assumed the presidency. Coolidge maintained close communication with budget officials, reviewing proposed appropriations carefully and recommending adjustments that reduced waste while preserving essential functions. He understood that financial stability was central to national confidence and that disciplined budgeting contributed to economic calm. His focus on economy extended beyond budgeting. Coolidge encouraged departments to streamline processes, eliminate redundancies, and improve the efficiency of public services. He did not seek dramatic reorganizations. Instead, he favored gradual refinements that strengthened the overall structure of government. Through quiet oversight, he fostered an administrative culture that valued responsibility and order. Department heads appreciated his fairness and the clarity of his expectations, recognizing that he judged success by sustained performance rather than by fleeting achievements. Coolidge's interactions with Congress reflected this same sense of respectful collaboration. He believed that the executive and legislative branches shared responsibility for the nation's well-being, and he approached congressional leaders with courtesy and steadiness. While he held firm views on fiscal restraint and administrative efficiency, he expressed them calmly, allowing discussions to proceed without confrontation. Lawmakers found in him a president who valued order, clarity, and the gradual implementation of policy. Beyond the realm of internal government, Coolidge also sought to establish a tone of calm leadership for the nation at large. Public appearances, though limited in number, conveyed a sense of quiet authority. He did not rely on dramatic gestures. Rather, he offered reassurance through simplicity and steadiness. Citizens still adjusting to the sudden transition of power responded positively to his calm presence. They sensed that his leadership rested not on ambition, but on a deep respect for the responsibilities entrusted to him. The Coolidge household in the White House contributed to this atmosphere of quiet order. Grace Coolidge, with her warm and engaging manner, brought a gentle balance to the formality of the residence. She hosted gatherings with understated grace, fostering an environment in which guests felt welcomed without ceremony. Their family routines remained simple, grounded in habits cultivated over years of modest living. This personal rhythm reinforced the sense of stability that Coolidge sought to project through his public role. As the months passed, Coolidge became increasingly comfortable in the presidency. He understood the weight of the office, yet he carried it with a calm rooted in decades of thoughtful practice. His approach did not seek to command attention. Instead, it aimed to preserve the steady functioning of government and the trust of the citizenry. His administration gradually gained recognition for its consistency, its clarity of purpose, and its reliance on principles rather than dramatic shifts. Coolidge's early presidency thus became a period of quiet consolidation. He restored confidence in government through orderly administration, established a disciplined approach to budgeting, and reaffirmed the value of thoughtful, measured leadership. These foundations prepared the nation for the economic growth that would soon characterize the middle years of the decade, just as they set the tone for his own continued service. In this way, Coolidge transformed an unexpected moment of succession into an opportunity to demonstrate the steadiness that had defined his life. The calm he established during these initial months became a hallmark of his presidency, shaping both public perception and the functioning of federal institutions. As Calvin Coolidge settled into the presidency, the economic landscape of the United States began to take on the shape that would later come to define much of the decade. The nation, emerging from the disruptions of the First World War, experienced a gradual return to stability followed by expanding prosperity. Industries grew, technological innovation accelerated, and consumer culture broadened its reach. Coolidge, with his deep-rooted belief in fiscal restraint and orderly administration, oversaw this period with a calm confidence that aligned naturally with the economic rhythm of the era. From the outset, he approached national finances with the same disciplined care he had applied to state budgets during his service in Massachusetts. He believed firmly that the federal government should not spend beyond its means, and that financial order was essential for long-term prosperity. His philosophy, grounded in both practicality and principle, emphasized reducing public debt, limiting unnecessary expenditures, and maintaining balanced budgets. These ideas were not new to him. They reflected habits formed during his early years of legal practice and municipal administration. Coolidge worked closely with the Treasury Department to implement policies that aligned with this restrained approach. One of the central figures in this effort was Secretary of the Treasury Andrew Mellon, whose economic principles resonated with Coolidge's own. Together, as they pursued a program of tax reduction aimed at encouraging investment, supporting business growth, and simplifying the federal tax structure, Coolidge believed that lowering taxes would allow individuals and corporations to direct more of their resources toward productive activities, fostering an environment of economic expansion. These reductions were enacted gradually over several years, forming part of broader legislation that sought to adjust federal revenues to reflect the peacetime economy. Coolidge supported these measures not as a response to economic crisis, but as a deliberate effort to create a stable and predictable fiscal environment. He expressed the view that prosperity should rest on the capacity of citizens to pursue their work with minimal interference, or trusting that disciplined private effort would yield benefits for the entire nation. His speeches on the subject were concise, grounded in the belief that economic health emerged from a combination of individual initiative and governmental restraint. As tax rates decreased, economic activity expanded across a range of sectors. Manufacturing grew steadily, supported by advances in electrical systems, machinery, and transportation. Automobiles became increasingly common, reshaping both industries and daily life. Radio broadcasting emerged as a powerful new medium, linking distant communities through shared programming. Consumer goods, once considered luxuries, became accessible to a broader portion of the population. Coolidge observed these developments with measured interest, recognizing that the nation was experiencing a transformation marked by both opportunity and complexity. While supportive of this growing economy, Coolidge maintained a cautious perspective. He believed that government should avoid actions that artificially stimulated growth or encouraged speculative excess. He consistently emphasized moderation, both in public addresses and in conversations with advisors. His view was that prosperity must be grounded in genuine productivity and supported by responsible habits among citizens and businesses. He preferred policies that encouraged stability, resisting proposals that he believed might lead to imbalances in the long term. In addition to tax policy, Coolidge supported efforts to streamline federal regulation. He believed that eliminating unnecessary administrative burdens would allow industries to function more efficiently, reducing costs and encouraging innovation. This view was consistent with his broader philosophy of limited government intervention. He did not seek dramatic deregulation, but he favored thoughtful evaluation of existing rules to determine whether they continued to serve the public interest. His approach sought balance, recognizing the need for oversight while avoiding excessive interference. Agriculture presented a more complicated challenge. While urban and industrial sectors experienced growing prosperity, farmers faced persistent difficulties. Prices for agricultural products fluctuated, and the post-war decline in international demand created economic strain in rural areas. Coolidge expressed sympathy for the challenges faced by farmers, acknowledging the essential role they played in national life. However, he approached proposed remedies with caution. He resisted measures that required the federal government to assume large-scale purchasing or price regulation responsibilities, believing such actions would distort markets and place heavy burdens on taxpayers. Instead, he supported cooperative associations that allowed farmers to organize voluntarily in ways that strengthened their market position. Coolidge's economic philosophy remained consistent throughout his presidency: reduce debt, lower taxes, encourage responsible private enterprise, and maintain clear, stable administrative structures. His public statements reinforced these principles, delivered in a tone that conveyed quiet confidence rather than persuasion. He often emphasized that prosperity was not created by government, but by the labor and initiative of citizens. The federal role, in his view, was to maintain an environment that supported such effort while avoiding actions that introduced unnecessary risk. The broader spirit of the 1920s reflected many of these themes. American society embraced efficiency, innovation, and personal advancement. New technologies transformed industries and reshaped the pace of daily life. Modern conveniences, electric lights, refrigerators, telephones, became increasingly common, fostering a sense of progress. Cultural life expanded as well, with music, literature, and entertainment reaching audiences on an unprecedented scale. While these developments did not originate from policy, they occurred within the stable environment that Coolidge worked diligently to preserve. Coolidge watched these transformations with thoughtful reserve. His personal life remained simple, unaffected by the excitement that often accompanied technological change. He appreciated the benefits of innovation but remained mindful of the responsibilities that accompanied prosperity. He believed that as the nation advanced, it should not lose sight of the steady habits that had long supported its civic foundations: frugality, discipline, and respect for the quiet work of daily life. Through these years of expansion, Coolidge's calm presence provided a counterbalance to the rapid changes sweeping the country. He did not attempt to shape the era through forceful direction. Rather, he allowed the natural momentum of economic growth to unfold within the boundaries of disciplined government. His leadership, grounded in restraint and clarity, reflected a confidence in the capacity of Americans to build their prosperity thoughtfully. As the decade progressed, Coolidge's economic philosophy became increasingly associated with the tone of national life itself, unhurried, optimistic, and grounded in the belief that order and opportunity could coexist. These were years in which the calm he fostered at the federal level mirrored the sense of possibility felt across the country. Yet even amid this prosperity, Coolidge remained attentive to the complexities of governance and the responsibilities of his office, aware that economic conditions could shift and that steadiness required continuous care. As Calvin Coolidge presided over the nation during the middle years of the 1920s, the United States underwent profound social and cultural transformations. These changes unfolded gradually yet unmistakably, shaping the atmosphere of the decade in ways that extended far beyond economic indicators. The rhythms of daily life shifted, new forms of expression emerged, and long-standing patterns of community and identity encountered forces that reshaped them. Coolidge, observant yet reserved, watched these developments with the same steady composure that guided all aspects of his presidency. Across the country, urban centers carried much of the momentum of cultural change. Cities such as New York City, Chicago, and Los Angeles grew rapidly, expanding outward through new neighborhoods and upward through modern buildings. Populations increased as people left rural communities in search of opportunities in manufacturing, commerce, and entertainment. The hum of streetcars, the glow of electric lights, and the steady increase of automobile traffic created a sense of movement that contrasted sharply with the quieter rhythms of earlier decades. Coolidge observed this shift not with concern, but with recognition that technological and economic developments often carried social consequences. The automobile, more than any other single innovation, contributed to changes in mobility and lifestyle. Widespread ownership of cars allowed people to travel greater distances for work and leisure, altering patterns of settlement and recreation. Road construction expanded across states, connecting communities in new ways. Entire industries, fuel, repair services, and roadside amenities grew in response to this transformation. Coolidge saw in the automobile a reflection of American ingenuity, though he maintained his own preference for simplicity, rarely allowing technological enthusiasm to alter his personal routines. Communication changed as well. Radio broadcasting emerged as a powerful new medium, carrying music, news, and storytelling into millions of homes. Stations linked distant listeners into shared experience, creating a sense of national connection that had not existed before. Families gathered in living rooms to listen to evening programs, forming habits that would endure for generations. Coolidge recognized radio's significance as both a cultural and administrative tool. Although he continued to rely primarily on written messages for official communication, he understood that radio had become a central feature of modern life. The decade also witnessed a flourishing of artistic and literary expression. In neighborhoods such as Harlem, writers, musicians, and intellectuals contributed to a vibrant cultural movement now known as the Harlem Renaissance. Jazz born from African American musical traditions spread across the country, shaping the sound of the era with its improvisational energy. Writers explored themes of identity, aspiration, and social change. Coolidge, though not personally immersed in these artistic worlds, acknowledged their growing influence and the broader sense of possibility they represented. At the same time, the period brought social tensions that reflected the complexities of rapid change. Immigration continued to shape American demographics, and the presence of new communities prompted both cultural exchange and periods of apprehension. In response, Congress enacted legislation such as the Immigration Act of 1924, administered in part by the U.S. Department of Labor at the time. The law established quotas aimed at limiting immigration from certain regions. Coolidge supported the legislation, emphasizing the need for stable processes in determining entry to the country. His reasoning rested on administrative principles rather than cultural judgments. He believed that orderly regulation was essential to maintaining national coherence. Prohibition formed another defining element of the decade's social landscape. The 18th Amendment, enforced through the Bureau of Prohibition, restricted the manufacture and sale of alcohol. Its effects were wide-ranging. While intended to reduce social problems, it also led to the rise of illicit trade, organized distribution networks, and widespread disregard for enforcement. Coolidge approached these developments with his usual restraint. He supported the constitutional process that established prohibition while recognizing that enforcement presented practical challenges. He refrained from dramatic commentary, believing that stable administration required respect for enacted laws even in the face of public resistance. Women's roles in society also continued to evolve following the passage of the 19th Amendment. Increased participation in public life, through voting, employment, and civic organizations, added new dimensions to the national conversation. Coolidge viewed this progression with calm acceptance, acknowledging the constitutional change and supporting the orderly inclusion of women within the political structure. His administration included women in appointed roles, reflecting his belief that capability, not gender, determined suitability for public responsibility. The decade's economic expansion influenced social behavior more broadly. Consumer credit became more accessible, allowing individuals to purchase goods through installment plans. Department stores, fashion, and household conveniences contributed to a sense of modern living. Yet Coolidge maintained a measured view of these trends. He appreciated the prosperity that allowed families to improve their living conditions, but he cautioned against undue speculation and excessive reliance on credit. His speeches often emphasized the importance of thrift and responsibility, values he'd carried since childhood. Religion and community life also experienced shifts during the 1920s. Traditional structures remained strong in many regions, while new movements and debates reflected emerging cultural differences. Discussions about education, modern science, and moral values became prominent in public discourse. Coolidge, consistent with his personality, did not approach these matters with dramatic expression. He believed that private life, including faith and personal conduct, rested largely outside the reach of federal authority. His statements emphasized respect for individual conscience and the importance of maintaining social harmony through mutual understanding. Across all these developments, Coolidge remained a steady figure. He neither resisted nor celebrated cultural change. Instead, he observed it with a quiet recognition of the natural evolution of society. His role, as he understood it, was not to direct cultural movements, but to maintain the conditions in which citizens could navigate them peacefully. He believed that prosperity and social progress required stable institutions and balanced governance, and he approached the decade's complexities with the same disciplined calm that had guided him throughout his life. The 1920s, vibrant and shifting, revealed the contrast between Coolidge's personal reserve and the era's dynamic character. Yet this contrast proved harmonious rather than conflicting. While the nation explored new forms of expression and experience, Coolidge provided a steady point of reference, an assurance that amid change, the structure of government remained grounded in order, responsibility, and quiet continuity. During Calvin Coolidge's presidency, foreign policy unfolded with a calmness that reflected both his temperament and the broader aspirations of the American public in the years following the First World War. The nation, though increasingly connected to international affairs through commerce, communication, and diplomacy, sought stability rather than confrontation. Coolidge shared this outlook. He regarded foreign policy as a domain where restraint, clarity, and steady cooperation could help preserve peace without entangling the United States in commitments that exceeded its capacity or its interests. Coolidge approached international matters with the belief that diplomacy should be conducted with precision and dignity. He supported efforts to strengthen cooperative relationships with other nations. Yet he remained mindful that the United States had emerged from the Great War with a desire for distance from European political complexities. In his view, foreign policy required careful navigation, maintaining goodwill, fostering economic ties, and contributing to global stability while avoiding actions that might draw the country into unnecessary conflict. One of the most significant international undertakings of the decade involved the agreements aimed at reducing the threat of naval competition. Building upon earlier efforts, the administration continued to support the principles established at the Washington Naval Conference. These principles emphasized limits on naval armament, fostering a climate of mutual trust among major maritime powers. Coolidge believed that such agreements held practical value. They reduced the likelihood of costly naval races, eased financial burdens on nations, and demonstrated the potential of diplomacy to address complex issues without resort to force. During Coolidge's presidency, the United States also participated in discussions surrounding international debt repayment. Many European nations had borrowed heavily from the United States during the war, and the question of repayment carried both economic and diplomatic implications. Coolidge supported structured agreements that offered clarity while acknowledging the challenges faced by debtor nations. He emphasized orderly repayment schedules and sought to avoid abrupt demands that could destabilize fragile economies. His approach reflected a balance between fiscal responsibility and international cooperation. Trade formed another important element of Coolidge's foreign policy outlook. He recognized that American industry increasingly depended upon access to international markets and that trade could serve as a stabilizing force in global relations. To support this goal, the government maintained a diplomatic posture that encouraged peaceful commercial exchange. Coolidge believed that trade, when conducted fairly, offered benefits that extended beyond economics. It encouraged familiarity among nations, reduced misunderstanding, and strengthened the incentives for peace. Coolidge also oversaw the country's relationship with nations in Latin America, a region with which the United States had long maintained close connections. He supported policies aimed at fostering stability and constructive engagement, while avoiding unnecessary interference in regional affairs. His administration encouraged diplomatic solutions to disputes and promoted principles of mutual respect. Coolidge believed that nations, like individuals, functioned best when allowed to manage their own concerns within a framework of peaceful cooperation. In Asia, the United States continued its diplomatic presence while navigating the complexities of a region undergoing its own transformations. Issues related to immigration, trade, and naval balance demanded careful attention. Coolidge approached these matters with a preference for dialogue and legal clarity. He believed that maintaining stable relationships required consistency in policy and respect for cultural differences. In all these interactions, Coolidge emphasized the importance of abiding by established agreements and avoiding abrupt changes that might disrupt international understanding. His administration also witnessed the signing of the Kellogg-Briand Pact, an international agreement that sought to renounce war as an instrument of national policy. Although largely symbolic in its provisions, the pact reflected the aspirations of the era, a hope that nations might commit themselves to peaceful resolution of disputes. Coolidge supported the agreement, recognizing its value as an expression of shared intent. He understood that treaties alone could not guarantee peace, but he believed that formal commitments helped create an environment in which diplomacy could flourish. Throughout these developments, Coolidge adopted a quiet role. He did not portray himself as a global leader reshaping the international order. Instead, he saw the United States as a nation that could contribute to stability through consistency, fairness, and disciplined restraint. he delegated many responsibilities to experienced diplomats and advisors, trusting them to carry out negotiations with the careful precision he valued. His own involvement often came in the form of written correspondence, messages to Congress, and thoughtful review of diplomatic proposals. Public reaction to his foreign policy remained measured. Many Americans appreciated his focus on peace and his reluctance to engage in foreign conflicts. They valued the sense of predictability his administration offered at a time when global affairs could easily become tumultuous. Coolidge's calm approach is grounded in principles rather than dramatic gestures, aligned with the nation's desire for a period of restful stability. Though foreign policy seldom occupied the centre of Coolidge's presidency, it contributed to the broader tone of his administration. His emphasis on peaceful cooperation, fiscal clarity, and diplomatic steadiness offered reassurance both at home and abroad. He believed that the United States expressed its strongest influence not through forceful intervention, but through the quiet example of orderly governance and respect for international agreements. Coolidge's foreign policy thus mirrored his domestic philosophy, rooted in restraint, supported by clarity, and guided by a belief in the quiet strength of well-maintained institutions. In an era of significant cultural and economic transformation, this approach helped to preserve a sense of continuity in America's role within the wider world. It reflected his conviction that peace, like prosperity, required calm stewardship and steady attention to the principles that sustained it. Calvin Coolidge's years in the presidency unfolded not only through the formal duties of office, but also through the quieter rhythms of personal life within the walls of the White House. The residence, shaped by ceremony and tradition, carried an atmosphere of history that touched each day with a sense of continuity. Yet within its expansive rooms and structured routines, Coolidge and his family created a life marked by modest habits, thoughtful reflection, and a steady calm that softened the demands of national leadership. Grace Coolidge, warm in spirit and naturally gracious, played a central role in shaping this environment. Grace Coolidge brought a gentle brightness to the residence, complementing the president's reserved demeanours with kindness and quiet humour. Her presence provided balance, helping to create a household where formality did not overshadow the simple pleasures of daily living. She welcomed guests with ease, took interest in the well-being of staff members, and maintained a sense of warmth that helped the family feel at home even amid the weight of political affairs. The Coolidge's daily routine followed a measured pattern. The president rose early, often before dawn, beginning his day in a peaceful corner of the residence where he read reports and correspondence in silence. He valued the stillness of these hours, finding in them a clarity that prepared him for the responsibilities ahead. Breakfast with Grace provided a moment of companionship before the day's official engagements began. Their conversations were often gentle and reflective, touching on simple matters rather than the complexities of governance. Life within the White House unfolded according to both schedules and quiet traditions. Meals were taken with understated formality, yet the Coolidges favoured simplicity. They preferred modest dishes and calm conversation, creating a family atmosphere that contrasted with the grandeur of the building. Holidays and special occasions brought a gentle sense of celebration, shaped less by elaborate display than by appreciation for continuity and tradition. Coolidge found rest in small routines. Evening walks provided moments of solitude, allowing him to observe the subtle changes of light across the grounds and to reflect quietly on the day's events. Though often accompanied by a small security detail, he maintained a sense of peaceful independence during these walks. They served as a calm interlude between the responsibilities of office and the quiet of the night. The Coolidge's sons, John and Calvin Jr., brought youthful energy into the residence. Their presence softened the formal atmosphere, filling spaces with the rhythms of ordinary family life. The boys explored the grounds, played games, and interacted with staff with the natural curiosity of adolescence. Coolidge, though reserved, cherished these family moments, watching their activities, sharing simple conversations, and appreciating the grounding influence of domestic life. One of the most cherished aspects of the Coolidge family's time in the White House was their relationship with the staff. Coolidge treated the employees of the residence with quiet respect, acknowledging their service through gestures of appreciation rather than grand declarations. He valued the predictability and care with which they managed the household, recognizing that their work sustained the calm environment he relied upon. Grace, with her warm nature, formed deeper connections with many of those who assisted the family, offering kindness that was remembered long after their departure from the residence. Amid the calm rhythms of daily life, the Coolidges also confronted moments of personal sorrow. In 1924, their son Calvin Jr. died after a sudden illness. His passing brought a profound quiet into the residence, touching the family with grief that lingered softly through the remainder of Coolidge's presidency. The loss deepened the president's introspective nature, increasing his reliance on silence, reflection, and the comfort of familiar routines. He continued his duties with steady composure, but those who observed him closely sensed the quiet weight he carried. The White House itself provided a certain solace during these years. Its familiar halls and structured spaces created an environment where Coolidge could move through days with a sense of continuity. He appreciated the historical resonance of the building, often reflecting on the individuals who had occupied it before him. He found comfort in the stability of its traditions, recognizing that the residence symbolized the enduring nature of the nation's institutions. Yet Grace continued to support him with unwavering gentleness. Her engagements as First Lady, from participating in charitable activities to supporting organizations dedicated to education and the needs of the deaf, brought purpose and balance to her daily life. She moved through public events with a calm warmth that reflected the broader tone of the Coolidge administration, steady, respectful, and quietly grounded in service. The president's evenings often ended with reading. He preferred simple texts, biographical sketches, essays, and works that offered reflection without intensity. These readings helped him settle into the restful rhythm necessary for the following day's responsibilities. He valued the quiet companionship of Grace during these hours, finding in her presence a sense of peace that extended beyond conversation. The residence also served as a setting for many official events. State dinners, receptions, and ceremonies unfolded with dignified order, guided by long-standing customs. Coolidge participated in these occasions with calm precision, fulfilling ceremonial roles without extravagance. He understood that these events represented the public face of the presidency, yet he maintained an atmosphere of restraint that aligned with his belief in modest government. Through all these experiences, personal and official, Coolidge's life in the White House maintained an atmosphere of gentle steadiness. The quiet routines, the presence of family, the respectful relationships with staff, and the calm spaces of the residence shaped a daily rhythm that supported his thoughtful approach to leadership. Even as the world beyond the residence moved through rapid change and cultural transformation, the interior life of the Coolidge household remained anchored in simplicity and quiet purpose. In this way, the personal environment of the White House became an extension of Coolidge's character, orderly, composed, and guided by a sense of gentle continuity. It provided the foundation from which he carried out the responsibilities of office, offering a balance between public duty and private reflection. As Calvin Coolidge continued his service in the latter half of the 1920s, the national political climate moved through a period of calm prosperity mixed with subtle undercurrents of transition. The country enjoyed economic growth, broadening access to consumer goods, and an expanding sense of modern possibility. Yet within this atmosphere, Coolidge maintained the same measured perspective that had guided him since his earliest days in public life. He observed changes without haste, responded to events with steadiness, and carried out his responsibilities with a quiet dignity that contrasted with the increasingly dynamic currents of the decade. Public sentiment remained largely favourable toward Coolidge during these years. His disciplined approach to federal spending, his respect for constitutional processes, and his steady calm appealed to many citizens who valued predictability during a time of rapid transformation. Newspapers often described him as a figure of reassurance, someone who provided a stabilizing presence amid the swift pace of change. His speeches, consistent in tone and concise in content, reinforced this perception by emphasizing restraint, responsibility, and the quiet virtues of steady civic life. Yet Coolidge himself did not interpret popularity as a signal to pursue extended tenure. He viewed public office as a responsibility entrusted to individuals for a limited period, not as a position to be held indefinitely. This belief, shaped by his upbringing and reinforced by decades of service, remained a guiding principle as his presidency progressed. In private reflections, he maintained a sense of modest detachment from the idea of long-term incumbency. He understood that leadership required clarity of judgment, and he believed that prolonged occupancy of high office might cloud perspective or weaken the disciplined habits necessary for sound governance. The political environment of the time offered opportunities for continued service. Many within the Republican Party assumed that Coolidge would seek another term, noting both his popularity and the relative stability of the country. Party leaders quietly expressed their confidence in his restraint and judgment, considering him a figure capable of guiding the nation through further years of prosperity. Some believed that his presence on the ballot would ensure continued support among voters who valued his calm approach to leadership. Throughout these discussions, Coolidge remained characteristically reserved. He neither encouraged speculation nor directly addressed future plans. Instead, he focused on completing the responsibilities before him, reviewing legislative proposals, meeting with cabinet officials, and ensuring that federal operations continued with the clarity and stability he prized. His silence on the question of re-election reflected not uncertainty, but a deliberate commitment to consider the matter with thoughtful care. The personal dimensions of the presidency also influenced his reflections. The White House, though a place of quiet order under the Coolidge family, was nonetheless a setting of constant responsibility. Coolidge recognized the weight of the office and understood the demands it placed upon those who occupied it. The loss of his son, Calvin Jr., had deepened his introspective nature, bringing a quiet sense of fragility to his experience of public life. While he continued to serve with unwavering dedication, he carried within him a renewed awareness of the balance between duty and personal well-being. In August of 1927, Coolidge made his decision known in a manner consistent with his character: simple, direct, and free of elaboration. While staying in the Black Hills of South Dakota, he handed reporters a brief written statement indicating that he did not intend to run for another term. The message contained no explanation, only a quiet assertion of choice. "I do not choose to run for president in 1928. This measured declaration, delivered without ceremony, captured the essence of Coolidge's philosophy. He believed that public service required discipline, and discipline included knowing when to set aside the responsibilities one had fulfilled. The nation received the statement with a mixture of surprise and reflection. Some had expected him to seek a second full term, citing the stability of his administration and the calm prosperity of the era. Others recognized the decision as consistent with his long-held beliefs. Commentators observed that Coolidge had always approached public office as a matter of duty rather than ambition, and that his departure from the presidency reflected the same quiet principles that had shaped his approach to governance. Following the announcement, Coolidge continued to serve out the remainder of his term with his usual steadiness. He did not allow speculation or public reaction to disrupt the functioning of government. Instead, he worked with Congress to complete outstanding legislative matters, reviewed appropriations with attention, and maintained regular communication with members of his cabinet. His decisions during this period reflected a commitment to leaving the office in good order, free of unfinished obligations. Coolidge also devoted time to reflection during these closing years of his presidency. He considered the broader trajectory of his life, his upbringing in Vermont, his early legal practice in Northampton, his gradual ascent through local and state offices, and the quiet assumption of the presidency after Harding's death. These reflections carried no sense of triumph, but rather a calm recognition of the continuity that had marked his public service. He viewed his career as a series of responsibilities accepted when called upon and relinquished when completed. As the 1928 election approached, Coolidge offered guidance to his party without asserting personal preference. He believed that leadership required distance from active campaigning, and that the office of the presidency should not be used to shape elections. Instead, he maintained a respectful posture toward the democratic process, trusting that the nation would choose its next leader according to its needs and aspirations. Despite stepping back from the prospect of re-election, Coolidge remained attentive to national affairs. He continued to support fiscal discipline, cautious administration, and respect for constitutional order. He encouraged the continuation of policies that promoted stability and prosperity, believing that the foundations laid during his presidency could support the nation for years to come. In all these actions, Coolidge demonstrated the same quiet virtues that had guided him throughout his life: modesty, steadiness, and thoughtful restraint. His choice not to seek another term reflected not withdrawal, but clarity, a recognition that public service required both engagement and, at the appropriate moment, departure. As Calvin Coolidge entered the final months of his presidency, a gentle sense of closure settled around his days in the White House. He approached this period with the same quiet deliberation that had characterized his entire time in office, recognizing that the transition from leadership required as much care as the assumption of responsibility. The year 1928 moved forward with a calm rhythm, shaped by Coolidge's determination to leave the government in stable condition and to guide the nation smoothly toward its next chapter. Each morning continued in familiar fashion. Coolidge rose early and read through reports and correspondence with the attentiveness he had practiced throughout his public life. He found comfort in this steady routine, knowing that clarity of understanding depended upon quiet review. His meetings with advisers remained purposeful, free of haste, and marked by respect for the responsibilities soon to shift to new hands. While discussions touched on matters of national policy, they also carried a subtler tone, one of preparation, reflection, and gentle transition. Coolidge maintained a consistent relationship with Congress during these final months. He understood that his term would conclude regardless of legislative outcomes, but he continued to advocate for measures grounded in fiscal discipline and administrative order. Appropriations were reviewed carefully, and he sought to ensure that federal spending would remain aligned with revenue. His messages to Congress reflected the calm precision of his earlier years, emphasizing responsibility and the long-term well-being of the nation, rather than short-term political advantage. Cabinet meetings also continued with their characteristic calmness. Coolidge encouraged his cabinet officials to maintain steady operations and avoid unnecessary alterations as the administration approached its conclusion. He valued continuity, believing that abrupt changes could unsettle the careful balance of responsibilities within federal departments. His guidance was gentle yet clear: complete ongoing work with diligence, prepare thorough records for the incoming administration, and preserve the quiet integrity of government during the transition. Public perception of Coolidge during this period remained largely favourable. Citizens, accustomed to the serenity of his leadership, looked upon his departure with a mixture of respect and reflective sentiment. They understood his decision not to run again as a deliberate choice rooted in principle rather than necessity. The newspapers of the time carried thoughtful commentary, acknowledging the calm steadiness he had brought to national affairs. His personal reserve continued to shape his image, presenting him not as a towering public figure, but as a modest custodian of order. Ceremonial responsibilities continued as well. The closing months of a presidency involved receptions, formal gatherings, and traditional events marking the approaching change in leadership. Coolidge fulfilled these obligations with the same measured grace he had shown throughout his term. His presence remained composed and understated, offering reassurance to guests and dignitaries. Grace Coolidge added warmth to these occasions, ensuring that the atmosphere carried a sense of welcome and gentle appreciation rather than hurried farewell. Coolidge also received visitors from various parts of the country, delegations, civic groups, and individuals who wished to pay their respects. His conversations with them were marked by calm reflection, often touching on themes of public service, community, and the enduring importance of disciplined citizenship. He valued these interactions, recognizing that they offered a quiet way to honor the bond between the presidency and the people it served. At the same time, he continued to avoid dramatic statements or broad declarations, preferring to let his actions and demeanor speak for themselves. The final months also provided time for personal reflection. Coolidge, never one to dwell on past achievements, nevertheless took note of the journey that had led him from rural Vermont to the presidency. He understood his life as a continuum of responsibilities, accepted without ambition and carried out with steadiness. Moments of private contemplation reminded him of the values instilled by his parents: self-discipline, thrift, and respect for community. These early lessons had shaped every step of his public career, guiding his decisions and tempering his approach to leadership. Thoughts of his family accompanied him through this period. The memory of his son Calvin Jr., who had died early in his presidency, remained a quiet presence in his reflections. This loss, though softened by time, continued to influence his understanding of life's fragility. It deepened his appreciation for the simple routines that brought him peace, and strengthened his desire for a quieter life after leaving office. Grace, steady and supportive, shared these sentiments. She prepared gently for the transition, maintaining the household's calm rhythm while anticipating the return to a more private existence. Coolidge and Grace also discussed their plans for life after Washington. They wished to return to Northampton, where they had built their home and established deep connections before entering national office. The thought of returning to familiar streets, quiet neighbours, and the simple routines of daily living brought Coolidge a sense of comfort. For him, public office had always been a duty rather than a destination. The prospect of resuming private life aligned naturally with his character. Throughout these closing months, Coolidge maintained his preference for modesty. He declined to shape a legacy through grand narratives or formal statements. Instead, he allowed the record of his presidency, its fiscal restraint, administrative stability, and gentle steadiness to stand on its own. He believed that public service was measured not by words, but by the quiet consistency of responsibility fulfilled. As Inauguration Day approached, Coolidge prepared for the ceremonial transfer of authority. He reviewed final documents, completed correspondence, and ensured that the affairs of government were in orderly condition for his successor. His manner remained composed, neither celebratory nor regretful, but reflective of a man who had accepted a significant responsibility and was now ready to return it. On his final day in office, Coolidge moved through the rooms of the White House with a calm appreciation for the experiences they had contained. The residence, with its quiet halls and enduring traditions, had become the setting of profound personal and public moments, yet he left it without hesitation, carrying with him the same sense of modest purpose that had guided his arrival. The next chapter of his life would unfold not through political ambition, but through the quiet return to private life, a transition Coolidge accepted with equanimity, ready to set aside the public duties he had fulfilled. When Calvin Coolidge left the presidency in March of 1929, he did so with the same calm reserve that had marked his entire public career. There were no dramatic farewells, no extended attempts to shape public interpretation of his time in office. Instead, he stepped quietly into the next chapter of his life, returning with grace to Northampton, Massachusetts, a place that had long provided him with steadiness, familiarity, and the comforting rhythms of ordinary life. After years spent at the centre of national affairs, the gentle pace of Northampton promised the simplicity he had always valued. Their home on Massasoit Street, restored to their full attention after years of absence, welcomed them back with the quiet warmth of memory. The house, modest in size and serene in atmosphere, reflected the character of its occupants. It offered space for reflection without grandeur, and its surroundings held the familiar sights of tree-lined avenues, neighbours' homes, and the slow-changing seasons of New England. Coolidge settled into this environment with a sense of genuine relief, and he had never regarded public office as a personal possession, and now, released from its responsibilities, he embraced the privacy that had always been more natural to him. The return to Northampton unfolded gently. Coolidge resumed simple routines, walking the town's streets, visiting local establishments, and reacquainting himself with the community that had shaped so many early chapters of his life. Residents greeted him with respectful warmth, acknowledging both his national service and his enduring connection to their town. He responded with quiet gratitude, maintaining the modest demeanour that had defined him long before the presidency. His presence did not dominate Northampton. Instead, it blended into the town's steady pace, becoming part of its familiar landscape. Writing became an important part of Coolidge's post-presidential years. He had long valued the clarity that emerged through careful composition, and he now devoted time to crafting essays, reflections, and a fuller account of his life in his autobiography. His writing style mirrored his public character, concise, thoughtful, and free of embellishment. He described events with calm observation rather than dramatic emphasis, offering readers insight into the principles that had guided him. These writings reflected not an attempt to justify his decisions, but a desire to express the disciplined simplicity underlying his approach to public duty. Coolidge also accepted invitations to speak on occasion, though he preferred settings that allowed for measured reflection rather than public excitement. Then his addresses emphasized familiar themes, the importance of restraint in government, the value of disciplined citizenship, and the quiet strength found in respecting established institutions. Audiences responded with appreciation for his sincerity and clarity. Yet Coolidge never pursued a return to political life. He regarded his public service as complete and maintained a firm separation between his past responsibilities and his present life. Quiet domestic routines shaped much of his days. He read widely biographies, historical accounts, and works of philosophy, choosing texts that offered insight rather than intensity. He assisted with household tasks, appreciated the calm companionship of grace, and maintained correspondence with friends and former colleagues. Visitors often found him seated in the comfort of his home, absorbed in reading or quietly observing the world beyond the window. Although his experiences had stretched across the full breadth of national governance, His preferences remained rooted in the simplicity of a life marked by order and modesty. Coolidge also spent time at the Beeches, a nearby estate where he often sought quiet retreat. The property, shaded by trees and set apart from the activity of town life, offered an ideal space for reflection. Here, Coolidge found rest in the gentle progression of days, observing the movement of sunlight, listening to the subtle sounds of nature, and allowing the stillness to guide his thoughts. These periods of retreat strengthened the balance he sought between engagement and solitude, a balance he had cultivated since his youth. Although no longer in public office, Coolidge paid close attention to national affairs. He followed developments in government and international events, maintaining an informed perspective on matters of public importance. Yet he did so without commentary, avoiding public critique of his successors. He believed firmly in the continuity of institutions and respected the responsibilities carried by those who held office after him. His reflections remained private, shaped by the understanding that governance required calm judgment rather than retrospective evaluation. The economic landscape of the country underwent significant shifts during Coolidge's early years of retirement. The stock market crash of October 1929, occurring only months after he left office, signalled a period of profound challenge for the nation. Coolidge observed these events with quiet concern, as aware of the complexities underlying economic cycles. He expressed sympathy for those affected yet offered few public remarks, believing that commentary from former presidents should be measured. His reflections focused largely on the enduring principles he had long supported: thrift, responsibility, and the disciplined stewardship of public resources. Within Northampton, Coolidge's life remained steady and undramatic. He attended church regularly, participated in community events when appropriate, and maintained close friendships with neighbours and local acquaintances. His modest habits drew little attention. He appreciated the constancy of the town, the unchanged nature of familiar streets, and the gentle pace of life that required no public statement or official action. These surroundings allowed him to reflect on the long arc of his career without the pressing demands of national leadership. Grace's presence continued to bring warmth to their household. She remained active in civic activities and maintained her gracious role within the community. Their partnership, strengthened through decades of public service and personal trials, found renewed ease in the quiet context of retirement. They spent time visiting friends, hosting small gatherings, and enjoying the simple pleasures of shared routines. Although marked by reflection, their days carried a sense of peace. As Coolidge progressed through these years, he remained aware that his time in national office had shaped the course of his life, yet he regarded it as one part of a broader journey rather than a defining identity. He valued the opportunity to have served, but he valued equally the return to the quiet life from which he had come. Northampton provided a setting where he could blend the memory of public responsibility with the continuity of familiar surroundings. In these calm years, Coolidge embodied the principle that had guided him since childhood, that steadiness, modesty, and thoughtful restraint could shape both public service and private life. His return to Northampton was not a retreat but a completion, a gentle rejoining of the life he had always cherished. In the years following his return to Northampton, Calvin Coolidge entered a period of thoughtful reflection, shaped by writing, quiet observation, and a selective engagement with the nation he had once led. Yet these years formed a gentle continuation of the disciplined habits cultivated throughout his life. With the responsibilities of public office behind him, Coolidge devoted himself to activities that allowed for contemplation without the strain of constant decision-making. Writing became not only an outlet for expression, but also a means of distilling the principles that had guided him in government and in private life. His autobiography, published shortly after he left office, offered a calm exploration of his life's progression, From his upbringing in Vermont to his years in the White House, Coolidge approached the task with restraint, avoiding dramatic embellishment and presenting events with the measured tone that had long defined his public speech. The work provided insight into his understanding of responsibility, the role of government, and the importance of modesty in public service. Readers found in his words a reflection of the quiet steadiness that had drawn national attention during his presidency. He wrote not to celebrate accomplishments, but to explain the underlying values that shaped his decisions. In addition to his autobiography, Coolidge wrote a steady series of articles and essays for newspapers and magazines. These pieces, usually concise and thoughtful, allowed him to comment on public matters without assuming the active role of a politician. He emphasized themes familiar from his presidency: fiscal responsibility, limited government, and the necessity of maintaining the constitutional balance among the branches of government. His tone remained gentle and reflective. He didn't seek to influence policy directly, but rather to contribute to a broader understanding of the quiet virtues he believed essential for a stable society. Coolidge's reflections often touched on the importance of patience and restraint, qualities he believed were fundamental to both civic life and personal character. His writing suggested a belief that challenges could be navigated more effectively through gradual adjustment than through sudden change. He rarely addressed his own presidency in detail, preferring to focus on general principles rather than personal history. This modesty aligned with his belief that public officials were temporary stewards of responsibilities that extended beyond any single individual. Although Coolidge preferred privacy, he accepted occasional invitations to speak at civic events, universities, and commemorative gatherings. His speeches during this period remained short, deliberate, and consistent in tone. He approached these occasions as opportunities to encourage reflection, rather than to inspire excitement. Audiences appreciated the quiet clarity of his remarks, recognizing in them the same qualities that had shaped his years in office. He seldom offered commentary on current political debates, though he did express concern when he believed fundamental principles were at risk of being overlooked. As the 1930s unfolded, the nation experienced profound economic difficulty. The Great Depression challenged long-standing assumptions about prosperity, financial systems, and the role of government. Coolidge viewed these developments with a mixture of sympathy and caution. He recognized the suffering experienced by many Americans and expressed hope for recovery, yet his public statements remained measured. He continued to emphasize the importance of balanced budgeting and responsible administration, even as the nation explored new approaches to economic stabilization. Coolidge did not criticize his successors, understanding that each administration faced its own unique challenges and made its decisions within a specific context. He believed that former presidents should maintain a respectful distance from active political debate, offering commentary only when grounded in principle rather than partisanship. His restraint reflected his broader belief in the quiet dignity of public service. He held firm to the idea that once an official left office, the responsibility for governance passed fully to others. Writing remained central to his life throughout this period. Coolidge found in the act of composition a sense of order and calm. He maintained a simple study in his Northampton home, where he spent long hours reading, reflecting, and writing. His desk held a small arrangement of personal papers, books, and correspondence. Objects useful not for display but for the steady work of contemplation. These quiet hours allowed him to revisit ideas he had long valued, clarifying them in gentle, disciplined prose. His correspondence with friends and associates also reflected this thoughtful approach. Coolidge wrote letters that conveyed appreciation, encouragement, and occasional reflection on national events. He expressed his thoughts with characteristic conciseness, choosing words carefully to convey respect and clarity. Yet recipients of these letters often remarked on the calm sincerity that permeated his writing. Though no longer in public office, he maintained an awareness of the broader currents of national life, yet he engaged with them in a manner consistent with his preference for modesty and distance. Coolidge also served on several private boards and committees, offering guidance drawn from his experience in governance. These roles allowed him to contribute quietly to public discussion without assuming the visibility of elected office. He reviewed proposals, participated in occasional meetings, and provided counsel marked by his characteristic restraint. His involvement was not dramatic, nor did he seek recognition for it. Instead, he approached these responsibilities as extensions of his lifelong commitment to steady, thoughtful service. Yet within this period of reflection, Coolidge also found time to engage more fully with community life in Northampton. He attended local events, visited familiar places, and participated in social gatherings with neighbours and friends. These interactions offered him a sense of continuity, linking his present life with the earlier years he'd spent in the town. His presence in the community remained understated. Residents encountered him as a quiet participant in local affairs, rather than as a public figure seeking attention. Despite his preference for privacy, Coolidge was occasionally called upon to provide formal reflections on national events or anniversaries. His remarks in these contexts often expressed a gentle appreciation for the enduring qualities of the American system. He emphasized the importance of citizenship grounded in duty, responsibility, and respect for established institutions. His tone conveyed a sense of calm continuity, reflecting his belief that the nation's strength rested not in sudden innovation, but in the steady cultivation of civic habits. Through all these activities, Coolidge's later years remained marked by a quiet balance between engagement and retreat. He contributed when asked, yet allowed himself the space to withdraw into reflection and writing. His days unfolded at a pace he had long appreciated, unhurried, consistent, and guided by the values that had shaped his entire life. These later writings and reflections stand as a gentle conclusion to his public journey. They reveal not a man seeking to shape how history remembered him, but one offering calm explanations of the principles that had guided him. His life had been grounded in quiet duty, and in retirement he found fulfillment in expressing the simple clarity of those ideas. In the final years of his life, Calvin Coolidge settled ever more deeply into the quiet routines of Northampton, finding in the gentle rhythm of each day a sense of peace he had long valued. His health, while generally steady, began to reflect the natural effects of age. These changes came gradually, marked not by any single moment of decline, but by a softening of energy, a slower pace in daily tasks, and an increasing preference for rest. Coolidge accepted these developments with the same calm composure that had guided him through the many transitions of his life. He did not dwell on them or express worry. Instead, he allowed each day to unfold with careful attention to its simple obligations and moments of quiet reflection. He continued to walk through Northampton when weather permitted, moving at an unhurried pace along familiar streets. These walks offered him a sense of continuity, linking the present with earlier chapters of his life. Occasionally he exchanged brief greetings with neighbours, many of whom had known him for decades. These interactions remained understated, shaped by mutual respect rather than by the formality associated with his public role. Coolidge appreciated these moments not as public appearances, but as gentle reminders of the community that had grounded his life both before and after the presidency. Much of his time was spent reading. His study at home, arranged with modest simplicity, became the centre of his days. Books, the correspondence, and personal notes occupied his desk in neat order. He moved through them quietly, pausing at passages that invited deeper reflection. Historical works held particular interest for him, offering perspective on the enduring patterns of human effort and governance. He also returned to familiar writings he had studied earlier in life, finding in them renewed clarity and reassurance. Reading allowed him to engage with the world beyond Northampton, while remaining rooted in the calm environment he cherished. Coolidge's reflections during these years touched often on the nature of responsibility. He considered the arc of his public service, not in terms of accomplishments, but in terms of the principles that had guided him. He believed that restraint, thrift, and respect for established order form the foundation of good government. In private conversation with friends, he occasionally shared gentle insights about the importance of modesty in leadership and the value of quiet decision-making. These reflections were never presented as instructions, rather they emerged as observations shaped by decades of thoughtful practice. Although he did not seek to influence public affairs, Coolidge followed national events with attentive interest. The political landscape of the early 1930s presented many challenges, and he read reports and newspapers with care. Yet he remained consistent in his belief that former presidents should not involve themselves directly in the debates of the moment. He offered private thoughts when asked by close associates, but he refrained from public commentary. This restraint reflected his long-standing view that leadership required clarity of role and that the responsibilities of office passed fully to those who currently held them. Coolidge's interactions during these later years were shaped by the steady presence of Grace. Their companionship deepened in quiet ways, expressed through shared routines and simple gestures of care. They spent evenings reading near one another, exchanged thoughts about books or daily observations, and appreciated the peaceful pace of life free from public demands. Their home provided warmth and continuity, offering an environment in which Coolidge could reflect gently on the past while embracing the calm of the present. Visitors who came to see him often remarked upon the serenity of his demeanour. He greeted guests with polite reserve, listened attentively, and responded with considered simplicity. These conversations seldom involved the intensity of political discussion. Instead, they revolved around shared memories, mutual acquaintances, and the passage of time. Coolidge valued these interactions as reminders of connection, yet he remained careful to protect the quiet balance he had established in retirement. As the years moved forward, Coolidge became increasingly aware of the fragility inherent in advancing age. He experienced periods of fatigue and shortness of breath, though he seldom spoke of them. He maintained a disciplined routine, adjusting the pace of his activities when needed. His physicians advised moderation, suggesting rest and steady attention to health. Coolidge accepted these recommendations with characteristic modesty, and neither resisting nor dramatizing the limitations he encountered. His reflections during this period often returned to the landscape of Vermont, where his life had begun. Memories of Plymouth Notch, with its quiet hills and simple structures, offered him a sense of grounding. He thought of his parents, whose disciplined guidance had shaped his earliest habits, of the small school he had attended, and of the quiet responsibilities he had carried even as a young boy. These memories did not arise in a nostalgic or dramatic manner. Rather, they appeared as gentle reminders of the continuity that connected each chapter of his life. Coolidge also considered the nature of public expectations. He recognized that the presidency, though often associated with dramatic action, could also reflect the quiet virtues of steadiness and restraint. He believed that accomplishments measured in calm stability held their own significance, even when they lacked outward drama. This understanding brought him a sense of quiet reassurance as he contemplated the broader arc of his life's service. In January of 1933, Coolidge experienced a sudden and unexpected decline in health. On the morning of January 5th, after spending a quiet night at home, he passed away peacefully from coronary thrombosis. Grace found him in his upstairs dressing room, his expression serene, as though he had simply drifted into rest. The news of his passing spread gently across the country, carried through newspapers that reflected on his life with a tone of respectful calm. There was no public spectacle surrounding his death, only a quiet national acknowledgement of the passing of a man whose leadership had been defined by steadiness and modesty. His funeral, held in Northampton and later in Plymouth Notch, reflected his character. Services were simple and dignified, attended by family, neighbours, and public figures who wished to honour his memory. The calm surroundings of Vermont, with its understated beauty, offered a fitting final resting place. Coolidge was laid to rest beside members of his family, in a hillside cemetery that overlooked the landscape of his youth. In his final years and in his passing, Coolidge's life remained consistent with the values he had long embodied: clarity, restraint, and a steadfast commitment to quiet duty. His death marked the close of a life guided by modest purpose, leaving behind a legacy not of dramatic moments, but of gentle steadiness, an enduring reminder of the quiet strength that can shape both public service and personal reflection. In the years that followed Calvin Coolidge's passing, historians, scholars, and citizens gradually shaped a collective understanding of his place in American history. This evolving assessment unfolded with the same unhurried rhythm that characterized Coolidge's life, developing not through sudden reassessments, but through thoughtful reflection on the qualities he brought to public service. His presidency, situated in a decade of prosperity and cultural change, came to be understood as a period marked by steadiness rather than sweeping transformation. Over time, his reputation would continue to shift gently as new generations considered the significance of restraint, modesty, and disciplined governance. Immediately following his death, public memory held Coolidge in warm regard. Many Americans remembered the calm he provided during years of rapid social and economic expansion. His quiet demeanour had offered reassurance to a nation adjusting to modernity, and his belief in limited government resonated with those who valued personal initiative and financial prudence. Editorials published in the months after his passing reflected appreciation for his simplicity and integrity. They acknowledged that while he had not sought to shape public opinion through dramatic gestures, he had influenced the nation through a gentle steadiness that contrasted with the volatility of public life. As decades passed, historians began to examine Coolidge's presidency through broader lenses. They considered the economic prosperity of the 1920s, assessing both its foundations and its vulnerabilities. Some viewed Coolidge's fiscal policies, emphasizing reduced spending, lower taxes, and a restrained federal role, as contributing to the decade's growth. Others suggested that these policies did not fully account for emerging structural weaknesses, particularly in agriculture and in sectors that relied heavily on credit. Yet even those who questioned aspects of his economic philosophy recognized the clarity and consistency of his approach. Coolidge's presidency remained notable for its lack of administrative turmoil and for the disciplined order he brought to federal operations. Coolidge's belief in limited government also became a subject of ongoing discussion. Supporters admired his conviction that the federal government should intervene sparingly, trusting citizens and local institutions to manage their own affairs. They argued that his restraint protected the nation from unnecessary expansion of bureaucracy and from the uncertainties that accompany rapid governmental change. Critics, however, reflected on whether greater intervention might have mitigated some of the economic imbalances that became more apparent after the decade concluded. Yet regardless of perspective, commentators generally acknowledged that Coolidge's philosophy was grounded in principle rather than expediency. His personal character played a significant role in shaping his historical reputation. Coolidge's modesty, frugality, and disciplined habits resonated with those who admired the quiet virtues of public service. He did not seek credit for achievements, nor did he assign blame for difficulties. His speeches and writings reflected a consistent respect for the responsibilities entrusted to him. Over time, historians came to appreciate the stability he brought to the presidency, especially when viewed in contrast to eras marked by conflict or dramatic realignment. Coolidge's presidency provided a reminder that calm stewardship holds its own significance in the broader tapestry of national leadership. As scholarship continued to develop, attention turned increasingly toward the cultural context of Coolidge's years in office. The 1920s had been a time of remarkable transformation. Technological innovation, expanding consumer culture, shifting social norms, and the emergence of new artistic expressions. Coolidge's presidency, though formally separate from these changes, offered a form of quiet guidance during a period of rapid social evolution. Historians noted that his steady demeanour created an environment in which Americans could explore new possibilities without concern for instability at the highest levels of government. His approach did not shape the cultural direction of the decade, but it helped maintain the structural calm that allowed such developments to unfold. Coolidge's foreign policy, marked by peace-focused diplomacy and an emphasis on cooperative international agreements, also received thoughtful reassessment. Scholars recognize that he sought to maintain global stability through agreements that reduced armaments and encouraged measured interaction among nations. His support for the Kellogg-Briand Pact, while limited in practical effects, reflected a broader hope shared by many nations during the era, a hope that conflicts could be resolved without resort to war. Historians came to view his foreign policy not as ambitious, but as reflective of a genuine desire for peace in a world still recovering from the First World War. Throughout the 20th century, Coolidge's reputation moved gently through cycles of renewed interest. Periods of economic debate brought his fiscal views back into discussion, prompting scholars to compare his philosophy with evolving approaches to public finance. Periods emphasizing efficiency and administrative reform highlighted his quiet successes in streamlining government processes. At times, his calm style of leadership drew interest from those seeking alternatives to more assertive executive models. In each of these moments, although Coolidge's legacy offered a steady reference point, a reminder of a presidency defined by restraint and quiet purpose. The personal qualities that had shaped his life also influenced how subsequent generations viewed him. Coolidge's understated humour, his preference for simplicity, and his clear writing style revealed dimensions of personality that contrasted with the formal image often associated with presidents. Scholars examining his papers discovered reflections that combined gentle wit with thoughtful insight. These writings offered a more personal understanding of a man who had long been known primarily for his reserve. Memory of Coolidge remained strongest in the places that had shaped him: Vermont, where his early life instilled a sense of discipline and modesty, and Northampton, where he built his legal career and maintained deep community ties. Historical organizations in these regions preserved his legacy with quiet dedication, maintaining sites associated with his life and offering context for understanding his philosophy. Visitors to these places encountered not a grand narrative, but the gentle continuity of lived experience that had defined Coolidge's approach to both public and private life. As the decades advanced, new generations of historians continued to reassess Coolidge within the broader narrative of American history. His presidency, once viewed primarily through the lens of its economic context, came to be appreciated for its administrative clarity, its constitutional respect, and its understated steadiness. Scholars recognize that leadership takes many forms and that Coolidge's contributions, although quiet, were grounded in principles that shaped the character of his presidency. In the evolving landscape of historical interpretation, Coolidge's legacy stands as a reminder of the quiet strength found in modest leadership. His reputation, shaped over time by thoughtful reflection, rather than dramatic reappraisal, continues to offer a sense of calm clarity, a testament to the enduring value of steadiness, restraint, and the gentle authority of disciplined service. As time extended beyond Calvin Coolidge's era, his legacy settled into a reflective space within the broader arc of American history. His life, shaped by modesty, discipline, and an unwavering respect for the quiet responsibilities of citizenship, came to be viewed through a lens that emphasized steadiness over spectacle. In considering the full span of his journey, from the stillness of Plymouth Notch to the halls of the presidency, and finally back to the peaceful rhythms of Northampton, historians and citizens alike found in Coolidge's story a reminder of the enduring significance of measured leadership. Coolidge's legacy began to take shape not through dramatic reinterpretation, but through a gradual recognition of the principles that had grounded his public service. His belief in limited government, fiscal restraint, and the disciplined management of public resources offered a contrast to periods of expansive governmental intervention. Over the decades, debates about federal spending and executive authority brought renewed attention to Coolidge's approach, prompting scholars to consider the long-term implications of his philosophy. Some praised the clarity and consistency of his views, noting that they reflected a deep trust in individual initiative and local institutions. Others questioned whether restraint alone could address the complexities of modern economic life. Yet all acknowledged the sincerity with which he held his convictions. Memory of Coolidge remained closely tied to his personal character. His modest habits, thoughtful reserve, and quiet humour appeared in recollections from those who had known him personally. These attributes shaped the stories preserved by family, friends, and communities that had touched different parts of his life. Visitors to Plymouth Notch encountered the simplicity of his birthplace, a landscape that illuminated the origins of the values he carried throughout his life. The site, preserved with care, allowed observers to understand how the calm environment of rural Vermont had shaped Coolidge's temperament. Northampton, too, played a significant role in the preservation of his memory. The town's steady pace, the familiar streets he had walked as a young lawyer and later as a retired president, and the home where he spent his final years all contributed to the broader understanding of his life. The Coolidge residence, maintained with respect for its original character, provided insight into the quiet domestic life that had anchored his public responsibilities. The community's gentle relationship with Coolidge offered an example of how leaders and citizens could coexist without barriers of grandeur or formality. Coolidge's papers, speeches, and writings allowed researchers to explore his thoughts in greater detail. His concise prose, often marked by clarity and restraint, revealed not only his views on government, but also his reflections on human nature, responsibility, and the quiet virtues of daily life. His essays, written after leaving office, offered glimpses into his understanding of history and public duty. They were not large declarations, but rather measured articulations of principles that had shaped every stage of his career. Scholars who studied these writings found in them a consistent thread of modesty and thoughtful consideration, reinforcing the image of a man who valued substance over display. As historical scholarship developed across the 20th century, Coolidge's presidency increasingly came to be understood within the context of the era's broader social and economic transformations. The prosperity of the 1920s, which had once been viewed chiefly through the lens of national optimism, became the subject of more nuanced analysis. Historians examined the balance between economic growth and emerging vulnerabilities, considering how Coolidge's policies reflected both the strengths and limitations of the period. Yet even as these interpretations shifted, Coolidge's commitment to administrative order and disciplined governance remained a defining feature of his legacy. Public interest in Coolidge experienced quiet revivals at various moments. Periods marked by debates over taxation, federal spending, and the nature of executive authority drew attention back to his example. Leaders and commentators who admired his restraint invoked his name as a model of disciplined stewardship. Meanwhile, those who viewed federal intervention as essential to modern governance engaged with Coolidge's ideas as part of a broader conversation about the balance between public and private responsibility. Through these discussions, Coolidge's legacy continued to evolve, not as a fixed judgment, but as an ongoing dialogue shaped by changing national needs. In educational settings, Coolidge's life provided students with an example of leadership grounded in modesty and careful deliberation. Teachers and historians used his story to illustrate the diverse ways in which individuals could serve their country. His rise from a quiet Vermont childhood to the presidency offered a reminder that significant responsibility can be carried by those who maintain humility and discipline. Coolidge's career demonstrated that leadership does not always require dramatics or sweeping declarations. It can emerge through the steady fulfillment of duty, the respect for established processes, and the quiet confidence that clarity will prevail through patient reflection. Monuments, libraries, and historical societies dedicated to Coolidge played a role in preserving the physical markers of his life. These places provided settings for contemplation, where visitors could reflect on the gentle progression of his career and the values that shaped it. They offered context for understanding how Coolidge fit into the broader narrative of American leadership, complementing the more dynamic portrayals of figures who governed during periods of conflict or dramatic change. In this calmer space of memory, Coolidge stood as a figure who represented continuity, order, and the quiet resilience of democratic institutions. As the long view of history extended further from Coolidge's lifetime, his legacy remained defined by the consistency of his character. He had governed not through force of personality, but through a disciplined adherence to principle. He had viewed public office as a responsibility to be carried with modesty and relinquished without hesitation. His calm presence had helped to steady the nation during a decade of rapid cultural and economic transformation. In the years after his passing, these qualities continued to resonate with those who valued the quiet strength underlying civic life. The full arc of Coolidge's life, from the stillness of his birthplace to the calm of his final reflections, revealed a leader shaped by the quiet landscapes of New England, the disciplined habits of thoughtful study, and a deep respect for the responsibilities of public service. His legacy endured not in moments of dramatic action, but in the steady example he provided. As historians and citizens considered his life in its entirety, they found in Calvin Coolidge a gentle reminder of the enduring importance of restraint, clarity, and the quiet dignity of modest leadership. In the long, unhurried view of history, Calvin Coolidge's life settles into a gentle arc of steadiness, modest purpose, and quiet service. From the calm hills of rural Vermont to the reflective evenings of his later years in Northampton, his journey unfolded without haste, shaped more by discipline than by ambition, and guided always by a belief in the quiet dignity of responsibility. His presidency, nestled within a decade of profound cultural and economic change, offered the nation a sense of composure, a calm presence amid shifting landscapes. Coolidge's legacy endures not through dramatic gestures or sweeping declarations, but through the subtle strength of restraint. He believed that government functioned best when it respected its limits, that public trust was earned through clarity and order, and that leadership found its lasting meaning in the measured fulfillment of duty. His writings, his decisions, and the gentle rhythm of his personal life all reflected this same unbroken thread of character. As memory carries his story forward, it does so softly, recognizing in him a figure who offered stability in an era of movement and calm reflection in a world finding its modern shape. His life reminds us that history can be shaped as much by quiet steadiness as by sweeping change, and that the enduring strength of a nation often rests upon the patient work of those who serve without seeking acclaim. With this closing reflection, the long path of his life settles into stillness, inviting the mind to rest alongside it. The gentle cadence of his years, the calm of his choices, and the peaceful continuity of his days form a tranquil conclusion, soothing, unhurried, and easing naturally into quiet.